All right, I'm still waiting for my view of YouTube to come up. It's still showing as I am offline when in fact I am broadcasting, so I'm gonna have to be patient and wait for it to catch up. Here we go. Firing up. Okay. Wow, that was a big delay. So really it's a question of audio sync now. So I really can't tell if it's in sync. I know the video is working. I just don't know if the audio is synchronized. Okay, everybody says it's looking good, so we'll go with that. And we'll just have to wait and see if that's gonna work for us. In the meantime, I've got a couple of, excuse me, I got a couple of laptops that I'm working on, and you guys can tell me how to fix it, because I'll tell you what happens here on the internet. We get a lot of people that come on and tell me I don't know what I'm doing. They come on and say they could have fixed it in 5 seconds, that their grandma could do it. And so rather than, traditionally I treat this as a classroom where I'm the teacher and I teach you the diagnostic procedure. I've emphasized time and again that hobbyists do things with duct tape and glue that a professional would never get away with, certainly not maintain their job or their status for much longer in the real world of paid technicians. And I'm not here to train people in corporate America. They already have their training. So the vast majority of my viewers are hobbyists and enthusiasts, and there's a portion of those who want to become technicians. But there's no YouTube channel that I'm aware of that really shows you what's entailed in professional work. They're all the YouTube tech channels, the vast majority of them anyway, are just hobbyists and enthusiasts that don't hold any accountability to anybody. There's no responsibility. And as a result of that, there is a huge disconnect that's going to be very painful for you to enter into the professional realm. If you're basing all of your knowledge and experience and saying, I'm good with computers because I can watch these YouTube videos and I completely understand them and I'm sometimes ahead of the host of the show, that means zero in the corporate world. It means nothing to them. As far as they're concerned, you have no education whatsoever. In fact, the education you have is quite harmful, because to untrain you, the false things that you've learned, in order to emphasize the accountability and how you're going to be held, you will be held responsible for your actions. If they cost the company money, it's going to end up with you losing a job. If you end up behaving in an inappropriate manner, if you're not easy to get along with, if you should cause any harm to any employee as a result of the work that you did, or if you cause harm to any customer or the company because you did not follow the procedures, whether you agree with those procedures or not, you will lose your job, and it will be very hard for you to find another job when they ask you during your next interview, why are you not with the previous company? So you can enjoy the hobbyists and enthusiasts here on YouTube, but I want you to understand that the corporate world is a completely different animal, and I'm here to try and bridge that big gap because I really would like to see and encourage people to enter into being professional technicians so that they can get on board. You don't see too many professionals making YouTube channels. They're mostly, almost every YouTube channel that exists is just somebody with a camera who's very enthusiastic about whatever the subject matter is. I would certainly love to see more professionals in every industry show us how they do their job, show us what's entailed. It would be great for people looking for a career change, or kids growing and getting ready to turn 18, getting ready to enter college, and really give them a good idea of what to expect when they choose their chosen career. And that will help them make a better decision. And so that's what I'm trying to do here today. So what I thought I would do is, I've got a situation here, and I want to make this very clear. There is no computer problem I can't fix. But this is a really cool problem, and I want to sit back and I want to watch your answers. Now, there will be a percentage of people who will say, I don't know the fix, and that's why I'm asking you. Those people, as they come in, will be banned. This is an exercise, and it is an exercise for education, and it is to separate professionals from hobbyists, because it's unlikely any hobbyist, well, I'm sure there's a few hobbyists that can understand how to solve this problem, but we're going to separate the men from the boys here, or the girls from the women. So I'm going to explain to you what the situation is in just a minute. First, I set that up. First, let me give a shout out and a thank you to a few viewers that have sent some things. I got a Inland Professional and dog treats. This is from Fred. So Fred, thank you for sending that. This will go into a future giveaway computer. We gave away 2 computers on the last video, and those were shipped out on Monday. So congratulations to the people who received those, or will be receiving them later this week. Andre sent a 240 gig SSD Plus, again, designated for a future giveaway. My thanks to Andre for that as well. And then this comes from Thomas, also known as TRK. And this arrived today. And what Thomas sent was some old DDR3 RAM and a mechanical drive. So I'm going to ask you guys, please do not send any mechanical drives. This probably cost more to ship than it would cost brand new and have free shipping. And DDR3 RAM I have no use for. So if you guys want to send DDR4 RAM or solid state drives to be used in the upcoming giveaways, very much appreciate that. But if you just have old hardware laying around, you know, anything older than Z87 or 87 series chipset, it's not going to be useful to us. It's like, I understand the intent is there and it's appreciated, but I'm sitting on them buried under hard drives and I'm trying to get rid of them. And this just added one more to the stack. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But I do appreciate the thought and the effort that went into sending it. I just would have preferred you could have taken that to Goodwill or something and saved some money rather than paying for the shipping on that. Again, any 240 gig or larger solid state drive, new or used, I will use those in the future giveaways. And we've got about 6 or 7, I think, right now. So we're not hurting for any, but if you want to help the channel, you're not helping by sending a bunch of old stuff I won't use. You're just spending money that you don't need to spend for the shipping. But again, it's an amazing community, very thoughtful, and it's really the thought that counts. And I do appreciate it, but I do want to avoid having people waste their time and money. So with that, let's talk about this laptop. So here's what happened. Customers got this HP laptop. They've had it for quite some time. And they said, what kind of laptop should I buy? It's time for me to replace it. And I said, well, if it's me, I like to look at Dell's. Dell has an outlet center. You can go to Dell Outlet. I don't know. You just Google Dell Outlet, and it'll take you to Dell's website, and you can buy refurbished laptops or PCs. And what I recommend is an Intel-based laptop for battery life and heat. And I recommend a Core i5 or a Core i7 with a minimum of 8 gigabytes of RAM and a solid state drive. Well, the customer didn't quite hear me. And what the customer got was a refurbished Dell, which I've got here. It's a Dell Inspiron, and I'm resetting it right now. And it's a thin laptop, and it has no access to the, no easy access to replace or upgrade RAM or hard drive. The hard drive in there is like a 5400 spin 1 terabyte drive. So that brand new laptop is slower than this many years old HP. Brand new laptop with a mechanical hard drive. So what I'm saying is don't get a hybrid SSD. Don't get a mechanical drive. If you're not going to buy a laptop with a minimum Core i5 or Core i7 with a solid state drive and at least 8 gigs of RAM, it's nothing I want to work on because it's way too slow, way too cumbersome, and as far as I'm concerned, you're going to be replacing it as soon as the warranty's out. It won't be worth fixing. It's enough to get you by just for a couple of years to get your next computer. So I'd say spend just a little bit more and then have a computer that'll last you 7 or 8 years. Refurbished laptop with those specs that I just talked about should be under $600 from Dell for like an Inspiron or a Latitude. Like look at the business Latitude models. I think you can pick one up with a solid state drive, Core i7, 8 gigs of RAM for like $560 US. Very reasonable. So if you're in a $300 budget, it's just nothing I want to work on. It's just that time is money, and these slower systems take more time. So now, do I bill the customer for my time, which turns out to cost more than the value of the laptop, or do I simply decline the work? This is where we go hobbyist versus professional. Customer called and said they wanted to put together a Windows 98 SE computer using all these old 98 era parts, and they detailed all the parts out. Big long list. And they said, can you help me with this? And I said, yeah, for about $3,500. And they said, wait, what? This is all old junk. I go, yeah, I'm a businessman and I have work to do. And that old junk is going to be very, very hard to find. It's going to be very risky to purchase it because a lot of stuff on eBay, you don't know what you're getting. A lot of times you get no guarantee or return. A lot of stuff is sold as is. And it's going to be very slow. So when I put it all together and I have to install Windows 98, it's going to take forever. My time has value. So the amount of time I have to put into that's about $3,500, including all the parts I would have to source. Guy said, well, that's outrageous. I said, I agree. I agree. It's absolutely outrageous. If you have a $6 USB flash drive and it fails, you can send it to $300 data recovery, and it will cost you $300 minimum to do a recovery on that $6 flash drive because the time. We're not here we're just looking for something to do. I got bills to pay and I got other people waiting for help, and I can't have one person monopolize my bench for weeks and then expect me to do it for $10. That's not how you run a sustainable business. But again, hobbyist versus professional. Now, if you're a hobbyist and you think it's fun searching for these parts like a treasure hunt, and you have time to piece it all together and test it and install it, and you have hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, then your time is zero value. You're not, that's your entertainment. It's not entertainment for me. It's accountability. If I put this all together and it doesn't work, or a week later a part dies, guess who's getting the phone call? Me. If you put it together and it doesn't work, it's your problem. You have to solve it. So you do get what you pay for. And it'd be no different than saying, I want a 1976 Cadillac Eldorado, and I want a brand new motor in it, and I want a brand new transmission. I want to replace the suspension, put an air ride in it, and I want to, do all new upholstery and headliner and repaint it. So I want it to look like new. What would you charge me for that? Probably around $60,000. They go, well, it's a $700 car. I'll go, yeah. And you need about $10,000 in parts minimum, and then you can multiply that times 3 at least for the labor, and then you better add some on for everything that doesn't go right because it's old. So hobbyists can do that all day long. They can sit in their garage and play on their cars and mess about, and the only one that they're going to screw over when they make a bad purchase or things don't work or are not done on schedule or on time is the person involved. So when you start getting a third party involved that's a professional, work is done to a higher level. No professional should ever say that's close enough. It's never, in my opinion, a professional attitude. If it's not done exactly the way it should be, then you're not a professional. You can call yourself one, but it doesn't make you one. So with that, John Williams says, can I send you an SSD for UK? I'm not sending anything to the UK. If you wanted to, you could go to Amazon.com, and then you can order direct from Amazon USA to send to me here in the USA. It would probably cost you a lot less than, say, ordering it from the UK and paying for overseas shipping. So that's one way you could do that. But otherwise, the easiest thing to do is to just submit a contribution through PayPal, which can be done worldwide, and then allow me to use the money as I see fit to get what I need to get in order to operate the channel. This is the only channel I have, so all the money that comes in all goes into this channel, which includes the equipment necessary to make this all happen, as well as sourcing computers and SSDs and et cetera for giveaways, including the deals I make with Silverstone, and made a deal with MCSoft a few years ago. We gave away software. made a deal with Acronis, and I have not made any money from any of these companies. MCSoft has never paid me. Silverstone has never paid me, and I'm working with Acronis right now to try and get something worked out more official as a type of sponsor, but I'm very finicky over which sponsors I would have, and certainly Acronis is one that checks all the boxes, as does AData and Silverstone and Coca-Cola, et cetera, et cetera. But in the meantime, nothing's really, there's no sponsors on the channel. It never has been, but I do hope to get one because that can make a big difference in the income, which can result in me getting a studio and being able to produce more videos more often in a more professional environment than my kitchen, if I ever get over this cold. So anyway, let me take a look here. Looks like I missed a few contributions. Let's give a few shots out. The Great Dane contributed $5. He says, there's a Coke for Carey and a vanilla Coke for me. Cheers, Carey. Well, thank you, Great Dane. And Mark Cook has contributed £2 and says, it's Coke time. Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate that. There are several sellers on eBay that absolutely specify no returns. It's quite often you'll see that, especially on stuff shipping from China. And you'll find if you live in the USA, shipping a $5 item back to China costs an average of $20 to $30. So it just doesn't make any sense. But again, even dealing with returns at all is very time consuming, whether or not eBay has your back. And if you're a professional and it's eating into your day, who's paying for your time? So again, as a hobbyist, you can have these hobbyist attitudes, but that will not play out in business. You cannot tell your boss in corporate America, I can get you that part cheaper from eBay. It'll take a while to get here, and if it doesn't work, we're still going to be screwed. And in the meantime, the employees won't be able to get that job done, and those customers will have to wait. You have to understand the absolute difference, and I will shove it down your throats as often as I have to, because I really want you to be prepared, because I wasn't. When you move from the private sector or the residential sector into the business world, the business world is very serious. There's a lot of money to be made. I see a lot of people looking for free solutions. Well, these free solutions lead you to free, right? You don't make any money on free, and it's how the poor stay poor. It's how the broke stay broke. People who don't have any money, the reason they don't have any money in most cases is they lack ambition, and they're looking for the cheap way to do everything. And that leads to a downward spiral. Now, this is just from my experience, and it's my perspective, and there are people that will argue with that. But arguing for your own limitations is nothing I have any interest in. I've seen people come from nothing and become hugely successful because they are driven and they have ambition. Everybody who's always looking to get something for free is somebody who lacks ambition. Because if you're an ambitious person, you will pay for the thing, and then you will figure out how to use that thing to make money, and you will do it all legally, and you will make more money than you can possibly imagine. But when you do the free thing, it starts becoming limited, and you start learning the consequences the first time it fails, the second time it fails, or it doesn't complete exactly what you need it to do. And then you have an upset customer situation where you were trying to increase your profit margin, and now you're losing so much time that you've not only upset the customer who's affected, but now you've got other customers, hopefully, that are waiting and have taken their business somewhere else, which you can add to your losses. So when you pay for a product, you have a support system in place. And that means when something doesn't work the way it should, you can get on the phone or get in an email, and you can get assistance to get that problem resolved. No man is an island. And so as long as people want to sit there and say, well, no opportunities exist for me, and I'm going to take what's free, and I'm going to use every free tool, that's fine. That's fine. It's not fine in the business world. And it just leads to itself. You're just chasing your tail. The more you have that attitude, the more you get that attitude. The more you justify it, the more you'll continue to justify it. And you will be in the same place 10 years from now as you are right now with nothing, thinking you're getting away with something when in fact you've made no progress whatsoever. So that's the attitude part, right? So the attitude I can't fix. Like if somebody's got a bad attitude, if somebody's full of excuses on why they can't, I can't help you. You are beyond my ability to help. But once you realize that the power is in your hands and that you can choose your attitude, you're not a victim of your circumstance, you are not a victim of any physical or mental limitation, you are not a victim of your environment, nor are you a victim of your location. You can't say, well, I live out here in the woods and there's no work. If you have internet access, you have the ability to work. You can work remotely. And basically, there's people who just aren't going to hear it. So I won't continue on with it. Those of you who heard me have heard me, and those of you who didn't won't. But with that, let's talk about the laptop, and let's just see what how knowledgeable we've got some people in the chat room. Hometown Touchdowns contributed $2. He says, okay, let's fix this PC. Right on. All right. So the customer got this laptop. He said, can you move all of my stuff from my old laptop to my new one? And I said, well, I can move your data, but not your programs. And I don't know what he bought. I just know he went to Costco. He got a Dell laptop. I don't know anything about it. Figure new has got to be better than this old junky HP. So we had upgraded this HP to a Samsung 250 gig solid state drive about 3 years ago. And he's been running it since. And it really sped it up. Anybody running a mechanical drive on your system, a laptop or a desktop, it is the single most crippling part of the entire computer. Your computer is running probably about 60% of its potential because you're running a hard drive, because you can't afford, or whatever excuse you've got for not replacing that mechanical drive, you're getting only about 60% of the power of your computer. But you replace that mechanical drive with a solid state drive, then and only then will you understand the gravity of what I'm telling you. Solid state drives are cheap, and cloning the drive over can be done for free with utilities that come with the SSDs. All the major manufacturers have their own cloning utilities when it comes to buying a solid state drive. Or you can use Acronis. Acronis has made deals with pretty much everybody but Samsung, I think, for giving you the software for cloning purposes. And then your eyes will get really big and say, wow, I should have listened to Carey years ago. But again, your computer, your time, not my problem. So we upgraded this guy to 250 gig solid state drive about 3 years ago. And it's starting to get a little long in the tooth. He's having battery issues. The battery won't hold a charge anymore. And I picked up both laptops from him, and I said, okay, I'll move your data over. And that's when I realized this new computer is slow as molasses. Initially, it had Windows 1709, I think, on it. So then it updated to 1803, and then it wouldn't update to 1809. So I updated manually to 1809. The whole day went by for that update to take place. And then I was able to take the data, my documents folder and pictures and music and movies, off of the drive in the old laptop and move that over to the new laptop. And then I called the customer and I said, listen, this brand new laptop is way, way slow. It's slower than your old one because you didn't buy it with a solid state drive. So what I'm thinking is I'll take the data that's on it now and I'll clone it over to your old SSD, and then I'll open it up and swap the 1 terabyte mechanical drive for your 3-year-old 250 gig SSD, and this thing should fly and it won't cost you anything. He said, great, sounds good. So I removed the hard drive out of the HP laptop and I plugged it into USB on my office computer, and I ran Acronis, which is installed on my office computer, and I made a backup of that drive in case everything went sideways, I can recover from it. Then I imaged this computer by plugging that same hard drive, that old SSD, into a USB adapter and into one of the USB ports on the Dell, ran the Acronis rescue disk, and cloned from the 1 terabyte internal mechanical drive, already configured with Windows 10 and all the data, and wrote on top of that Samsung 250 gig. Then I went to open this brand new laptop up and realized there's no easy access. There's about 12 screws that have to be removed, and the rear cover still won't come off, and I suspect that there's a screw underneath the label that has to be removed, and I don't want to remove it because it's a brand new laptop and I don't want to endanger any issues with any return. So I called the customer and I explained this to him. Now I've got hours and hours and hours invested in this at this point. He goes, all right, can you put it back? Can you put them both back the way they were, and I'll take the Dell back and get something else? Can you send me a link to something? And I'll just continue to use the HP in the interim. So I said, sure, no problem. So right now the Dell is performing a factory reset, putting it back to how it was out of the box. And this factory reset has been going on since 8 o'clock this morning. And, it might have just finished. And then I restored the Acronis image back onto the Samsung SSD to put it back the way it was. But Acronis is a little too smart for its own good. What Acronis did is it said, well, the computer you're restoring the image from is UEFI. So in order to make this drive bootable, I'm going to convert it to a GPT partition. Well, I didn't realize that, and there's no way to turn it off. And this is, I'm having a beef with Acronis at this point on that. So when I put it in this laptop does not support UEFI. And when you plug that drive in, it says it's just a big drive with no data on it. It cannot see or make any heads or tails sense of that drive. It is completely, as far as the computer's concerned, erased. So then I loaded the mini partition tool and converted the GPT partition to MBR. And now it can see the drive, but it still won't boot to it. It says non-system disk, press any key. So everything's there. It's still got Windows 7. It's still got the customer's data and programs, but we have no way to boot to it. There is no Windows 7 rescue disk made, and I don't know if it's Windows 7 Home. I don't know if it's Windows 7 Pro. I don't know if it's 32-bit. I don't know if it's 64-bit. So I have no rescue disk to load to try and repair it. So my question to you in the chat room, we're going to test your technical knowledge, is if you had found yourself in my position, how would you proceed? Now, if I had used Macrium Reflect to make the image, I wouldn't have this problem. The problem I have, and I love Acronis, but I've never dealt with this before. When I took instead of making the image from the laptop, I made the image by taking the hard drive out, the solid state drive, and plugging in via USB on my desktop computer in my office. And because my desktop computer is UEFI, it adapted it, and it should never have done that, because making an image is different than making a clone. Now on a clone, it's supposed to do that to make the drive bootable, but on an image restore, Acronis has no business automating that. It should at the very least ask the end user, do you want to modify the drive to make it bootable on this system? And it does not do that. So I have opened up the issue with Acronis, and hopefully they will address it. In the meantime, the problem I have now is even restoring the image locally, like using an Acronis boot disk. The reason I took the machine out is none of my Acronis boot disks will boot on this laptop. They were all UEFI only. So then I had to download another version of Acronis, create another boot disk that would boot with, MBR. And then when I read the image back, it's still in UEFI mode, and it still won't boot. So I am absolutely stuck. Now, there's a few different ways I can go about fixing this, but before I do that, I want to get the input from you guys on what you think is a good solution on how to solve this particular issue. Now, this is an issue dealing with older hardware, and as a working technician, you've got to have the knowledge of MBR versus GPT partitions, UEFI versus non-UEFI systems, and their intercompatibility or lack thereof. And I don't normally work on systems this old, but this was a relatively simple job. And in fact, everything would have been fine if Dell would have made this laptop accessible to get to the RAM and the hard drive, but they did not. The entire laptop has to come apart to access something as simple as the hard drive and the RAM. And this laptop is running at about, I would estimate, 35% of its potential. It is that slow. And by simply replacing that mechanical drive inside of that laptop with an SSD, I estimate it'll be 65% faster. It is horrendously slow. So what Dell did is they're hitting a price point by racing to the bottom. These companies that race to the bottom, it's not sustainable. You can't sustain that. You're just going to have upset customers. And what they've done is they've made a laptop to hit a price point and to increase profit margin. Nobody should be selling mechanical drives as boot drives in a brand new system unless it's under $300. It shouldn't even be an option. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, even at $300, it should have a small SSD, because when it's crippling up to 50%, now I know I keep moving these numbers around. At one time I said 40%, 65%. It depends on the system. With this laptop right here, it's a rocket ship that runs like a snail. So putting an SSD in there is going to make a world of difference, more than 50% difference in boot time and accessibility. It takes forever to do anything on this laptop. Not for lack of RAM and not for lack of a processor. It's that darn hard drive. And not a hybrid drive. Those hybrid drives are a complete waste of money. They were there as a solution to the, as an alternative to expensive solid state drives. But by the time they invented them, the solid state drives had already plummeted in price, negating the necessity for having one. So I feel bad for anybody that's got a hybrid drive. To me, that's just a complete waste of money. And for a few dollars more, and sometimes even for not even the same difference in price, you can get a solid state drive with the same capacity. It's amazing how the prices have come down. It depends on the hybrid drive. So you've got regular regular mechanical drives are cheap. Hybrids, mechanical drives are a little bit more money, and then the solid states, depending on the hybrid drive, maybe a little bit more, or maybe identical in price. It just doesn't make any sense for a brand new computer today with an i5 or an i7 to have a mechanical drive. It is crippling the entire system. Furthermore, the mechanical drives need more power to run, and they're susceptible to damage if the laptop is bumped in any way, shape, or form during a read or write operation on the hard drive. And because laptops are portable, it just doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't you want to extend your battery life, increase your performance, and remove the possibility of data corruption or head damage while the laptop is being moved, while it's being, data is being read or written to the drive? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. So Vizentro says, do a disk part. Well, I can't do a disk part because I have nothing to boot to. So what am I going to boot to do a disk part? Since I don't know what version of Windows I have, I don't know if it's Home or Pro, 32-bit or 64-bit, what is it that I'm going to boot to in order to get me to a command prompt so I can run disk part? Is a fresh install off the list? Well, if we do a fresh install, he's going to lose all of his programs. He's going to lose his Microsoft Office, his email configuration, all that's going to be gone. Now, when we were going to do the Dell, of course, we had to reinstall these applications, and he was ready for that. But the idea is that to just give him back the HP until he gets another computer to replace this Dell and, let him get back to work. We don't want to have to pay, because he bought a license for the new Microsoft Office to go on the new Dell, but we don't want to waste that on the old computer. And if I was going to do a new install, I would install Windows 10. I would not put Windows 7 on because I'll be here for a day and a half installing updates. Stealth Mode said I would order the original rescue disk from HP. Yeah, I suppose you could, but customers going to be without for what, 10 days to 2 weeks waiting for that? Plus the expense, if it's even available, which it probably is no longer available. That will not an acceptable answer. What else you got? RAM will tell you 32-bit or 64-bit. No, it will not. Customer can have 4 gigs or 8 gigs of RAM. I'm sorry, customer could have 4 gigs of RAM and still be 64-bit. Obviously, the other thing that happens is a customer can have 8 gigs of RAM but still have a 32-bit Windows and only use 4 of it and not know the difference. So you cannot tell from RAM alone. That's not a, again, these hobbyist and enthusiast mindset does not work in corporate America. In corporate America, you have to be able to get to the solution very, very quickly. You cannot let a single user consume too much of your time, or you're going to be in a meeting with your boss wondering why you only fixed one computer that day in an 8-hour day. And then you've got an upset customer who probably went to their boss and said, I haven't been able to work all day today because the IT guy was here all day because he didn't know what he was doing. So again, if you're a hobbyist and you're sitting in your garage or your bedroom, you've got all day to mess around and nobody's counting on you, and you're the only one that impacts. But let's keep going. I will explain to you why these issues don't apply. Reset the BIOS. There's nothing to reset in the BIOS. I'm not exactly sure why you think that's an issue. The BIOS does not support UEFI. You can reset the BIOS every single minute until the cows come home. It still isn't going to support UEFI. This is not a BIOS configuration issue. It simply is too old. The BIOS was written and the computer was designed before UEFI was invented. Therefore, it doesn't support it. A Windows 10 USB stick version of this part will work. Use a Windows 7 disk and go to repair. The Windows 7 disk will say that it's not the same version of Windows and will not allow you to boot. And because the system won't boot, I can't make the rescue disk now. It's too late. Use a Linux Live USB stick to see if you can mount the hard drive. Well, I can mount the hard drive. I can mount it in Acronis. I can get all the customer's data back. That's not the issue. What I'm trying to do is fix the problem with it booting that Acronis created because I imaged it on a UEFI system. For these situations, you should have a Win10 rescue disk. Well, the problem with a Win10 rescue disk, which is the pre-installation environment, which they've now called the WinRE recovery environment, is you really need to make it on the machine you intend to use it on because of UEFI needs a different boot version than the MBR version, and then different versions of Windows, like 32-bit versus 64-bit. It won't enable you to do certain things. It may not even see the hard drive, or it may not allow the commands to run. So I've got a Windows 7 USB stick that I've made. I don't know if it's going to work, but all of the Windows 7 USB installs that I've tried say they are not compatible with whatever Windows 7 this has, and it won't allow me to continue. So we'll give this a shot. Maybe it will load up. If it'll give me the option to repair and I can get to a DOS prompt, then I can certainly run the diskpart command. My goal is to be lucky, to get lucky, and to find the same version of Windows 7 that will recognize the version of Windows 7 that he has. And we'll hit F9 to go to device boot order, and we'll change that to SanDisk. And let's see what happens. Like I said, I've tried the Windows 7 Home and the Windows 7 Pro that I have. They're 64-bit, and they will not work with this. They say this is not a Windows 7. It's not a similar OS, and so it won't allow me to continue. So this is a 32-bit, and we'll see if I get any better luck with it. At this point, I strongly suspect it's going to tell me it's not compatible, but this, as far as that avenue goes, the solid-state drive has been completely recovered back with Acronis, but Acronis has modified the boot area, and as a result, it will not start in this laptop anymore. But all the data and programs reside on it as it did before I modified it. So here it's asking about Windows 7, English, etc. We'll hit Next, and we'll hit Repair, and let's see what it does here. So right now it says it's searching for Windows installations, and let's see what it comes back. I'm guessing this must be a 32-bit version because I don't think I could get this far with the Windows 7, the Home and Pro installs that I have. You know, it'd be very easy to bury yourself in operating systems as a technician if you want to support everything that's out there. So Windows found problems. Let's repair and restart. Failed to save startup options. Okay. Restore your computer using a system image. That won't work. Use recovery tools. Let's try that. Next. We can go to command prompt and we'll type in disk part. And let's take a look. This is further than I've gotten before, so this has to be the issue here. It's got to be 32-bit. So the command, it's going to be hard for me to show you everything here, but I'm in a command prompt and I've run the diskpart command, and I don't see anything set as active. So I think I need to select disk 0 and let's see. There's got to be, whoops, I just closed it out like an idiot. Let me open it back up again. Disk part, select, disk 0, list, partition, and we probably want to go to the first partition, select, yeah, I don't know. Let me exit that and let's restart. And all I've done is I've set the very first partition as active, but it may not be the first partition that's active. It may be the second one. Let's see what happens. Nothing's happening. Let's hit escape. Hold on, let me turn this off. I might be trying to boot to the flash drive again. Let me turn that off, disconnect the flash drive. We'll turn that back on. Now there are a number of commands, yeah, still non-system disk, press any key. So we'll turn it back off and we're gonna just go back into that repair. So just getting into that repair required having the right boot disk to boot from. So we'll do F9, which gives us the option to boot to different devices. And we'll choose the flash drive there, and we'll go ahead and let that load up again. Andrew suggests using a Windows 10 install. Again, there does tend to be an issue with Windows 10. Well, I haven't tried it with Windows 10, but I can tell you that with Windows 7, it absolutely has to be the right boot disk, or it simply doesn't go far enough to let you get into the repair side of things. And then once this is resolved, then I have another machine that I've got to install Windows 10 on, which should be pretty straightforward. So once again, we come back up to our install screen. And we'll hit next, and then we'll go to repair. Of course, we could always pull the data. That's really not a problem. Customer's data is safe. What I'm trying to do is save the customer's application so that they can go back to work on this computer without, because they're going to have to start over when they replace it. So we've already got a new Microsoft Office ready, but we don't want to waste that product key on this computer. We want to return that Dell computer back here and put this back the way it was. So let me go back to the command prompt. And let's try. Looks like it opened two of them for some reason. Here we go. All right, so if you want to fix the boot area on a hard drive, there's a couple of different commands you can run. One is to fix MBR. MBR is short for Master Boot Record. Now that command is not on the top of my head. I can't remember, but I can quickly Google that. And I'm sure there'll be people in chat. They're going to tell me what it is. Let's see. There's a few different commands that we can consider. And it would be boot rec space / fix MBR. /fix boot. Apparently I have to run each one individually. And then we'll also do Rebuild BCD. And then we'll wait for that. It's going to take a while to run. Okay, let's see if we have any better luck with that. We'll restart again. I better shut it off. And we'll pull that drive out. Now that would be sort of a standard normal practice, right? You rebuild your master boot record, and you go through that again. You know, with this laptop, again, we're dealing with a laptop that's so old, everything has to be exact, or it's not very forgiving. Now, if it were up to me, like I said, I'd just put Windows 10 on it anyway. And you can see what's happening now is a bit different. We've got a blinking cursor up here in the corner, and the laptop just sits and does nothing. So we've made a little bit of progress, but still not enough to make it boot. Now remember, as a hobbyist or enthusiast, you can spend weeks on this, nobody cares. But when a paying customer is waiting on you, and you apparently don't know what you're doing, at least that's the signal you're sending to your customer. This is taking a long time because I'm in over my head. Somebody who is capable will be able to get this resolved in an adequate amount of time and move on to the next customer. Unfortunately for me, I have moved on from Windows 7 2 or 3 years ago, and as a result, when I see Windows 7 now, it's usually to upgrade it to Windows 10. With regards to repairing Windows 7, I just don't repair Windows 7 anymore. The cost of the time involved to get Windows 7 repaired in most cases exceeds the cost of simply putting Windows 10 on it. And in most cases, you're going to have to reinstall Windows 7 to fix it. And if you're going to have to reinstall Windows 7, you're going to download forever updates, you know, for depending on your internet speed, at least a day and maybe longer than that, waiting for updates to download and install. And I've got a video detailing all the updates. It's about 1.5 gigs of updates. It's painful. So you put Windows 10 on it, you're pretty much good to go. There's a few updates when you're done and all your drivers are there and everything. That's a whole nother issue with Windows 7, by the way. So we'll start back up with this drive again. And again, I have to hit F9 to give me my boot options here. And we'll boot to the SanDisk. There we go. So let me look at the chat and see what you guys are suggesting. Okay, we're back here. We'll run next on that. And then we'll go back to repair. You mentioned Macrium Reflect would not cause this problem. Why? Because you have to do everything manually in Macrium Reflect. It's one of the reasons I don't like it. Acronis automates everything, which makes it very simple. However, and this is the first time this has happened, Acronis has automated something I didn't want it to automate and does not appear to have a way to disable it. So that's where I got myself in trouble. And I honestly didn't think I would be using the backup. When I made it, I just said, oh, this will just be for safekeeping. My logic being that should the new laptop die, I still have the customer's data. If I had made the Acronis backup with the laptop that the drive was installed in, I would not have had this problem. I would have done my restore in 5 minutes, and it could have returned it to the customer earlier today. But because of that, in my optimism, I find myself in this position. And even just getting a disk that would load so I can see, just to get to a command prompt, has been an exercise in futility in trying to find anything that works, because I just don't know what it has. So even like System Restore, if I go to System Restore, it's going to say you've got to find your Windows installation, which it's not seeing. So we're back here at the command prompt, and let's take a look at what some people are suggesting here. Would the BIOS not show what version Windows is on? No, the BIOS does not contain your software information. No. Mr. M wants me to type list volume. All right, let's type list volume. Let's see what we have. Oh, I got to go to disk part. List volume. No, list disk. What am I doing wrong? Disk part. There we go. List volume. We see volume 1, FAT32, healthy. Select volume 1. It would probably be volume 2, actually. Select volume 2. Let's list partitions. And now I've selected partition 2 as the active partition. And let's get out of disk part. And let's see if it'll find the operating system. It says successfully scanned. It found one on drive D. So it says D:\Windows. Is that the customer's drive? It is. So the D drive listed here is the customer's drive. So now the question is, can we do a master boot record fix? I'm trying to think what that is. I just had that command a minute ago. Bootrec / Where did I have it? I had it up here. Rebuild BCD. I gotta spell it right though. Third time's a charm. So we're running the Rebuild BCD on here. Successful. Do you want to add it to the list? Yes. The requested system cannot be found. So we go back into a loop again. mbr/fix is not a command. WinVer does not work outside of Windows. Oh, here's an interesting one. Vincent's got a command here that looks promising to me. Let's try that out. BCD boot. That's a long command. C:\Windows isn't the drive though. It's on D. See, the great thing about this is I can entertain these ideas all day long, and I still have the image to restore to if it all gets sideways on me. You know, that command is not working. What's the problem? Nope. Nope. Whatever that command is there that did not work, it won't accept it. Nope. No BCD edit is possible. What else you guys got? fdisk/mbr. Change the BIOS setting. There's no BIOS setting to change, guys. You can say it all day long. It isn't going to be there. This was invented and created before UEFI was invented. They did not have a time machine. You cannot use modern day fixes on old hardware. Again, we got to separate the boys from the men here. This is how we can really... So I want to warn you that when you throw in a bad suggestion, you are screaming, I'm a hobbyist, and this is why you shouldn't listen to me. This is the point I'm trying to make in the video. So what else do we have? Boot rec/fix boot. We already did that. And so this is intended to be a humbling experience for the vast majority of you who think you can fix everything and you don't have a job in the IT world. This is a prime example of what I'm trying to emphasize here. You can Google things, and it's great. Google can provide many of the answers that you need, but it does require some experimentation. If you don't have any experience, you just keep trying and trying and trying until you figure it out. But when somebody's paying you and it's taking you all this time to try, unless you get lucky and you nail it on the first chance, you're not actually exercising any knowledge other than how to search. So being a tech requires a certain level of experience behind you, right? That you go, okay, I remember this, I remember how I dealt with this. And then of course, having the right tools. You know, the tools ultimately make a big difference between a great tech and a not so great tech, just as a surgeon who only has a butter knife and a pair of pliers may not appear to be a very good surgeon. So the tools you use are absolutely critical. And there are third-party tools that are available to fix problems like this, but most of them cost money. And unless you're fixing these problems on a daily basis, it doesn't make sense to pony up that money unless you're making enough profit. Because remember, anything you spend is going to eat out of your profit, or it's going to add to the bill for the customer. And the customer at this point, I have no intent on charging him a thing, because as far as I'm concerned, I've done nothing. I've spent time, but because I did it in the wrong order, I should have, the very first thing I should have done when I noticed the computer was running slowly was verified what kind of storage it had. And as soon as I realized it had a hard drive, I should have then checked to see if the hard drive was easily accessible to upgrade it to a solid state. But instead I assumed, because I'm in a hurry, and the irony there is it slowed me down majorly and put me in this position. Convert MBR in disk part. I've never run that command, but let's try it. Let's run disk part. And list disk. We'll select disk 1. And what was that command? Convert MBR. Never heard of that. The specified disk is not convertible. Yep. That's not going to work. What else you got? Fixed disk / MBR will not work. That's an old DOS thing. That's not going to work in Windows. In fact, I might even have fdisk on here. Oops. Let's see. No. We could have to go to, let's see, go into Windows maybe. No, so System 32. Yeah, we're well beyond just a boot record here. So people are putting these long commands in the chat, but these commands don't work. Every time you type boot rec/, that's one command. Boot, So when somebody types in all that, it cannot be typed as one line. That H/ is a command. So then when you hit enter on that, then you can do the next one. So for this one person, they've listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 commands. I've got to believe that's not going to work, and it's going to be a waste of time, and it's way too much in there. So here's an interesting one. So this BCD edit does not appear to be a command that I can type. When I type in BCD edit, there's nothing. It says the boot configuration data store cannot be opened. The requested system device cannot be found. So no BCD edit commands will work. Is there a Windows product key sticker on the laptop? There is, but it's completely been rubbed. All the ink has been rubbed off of it, so it's unreadable. John says he would trash the laptop. Well, it looks like the Dell finished its rebuild.
A touch of Wi-Fi there, and we'll have your PC ready for all you plan to do.
So this is now ready to be put back in the box and returned.
And if you'd like me to stay quiet, just select the little microphone icon towards the bottom of your screen.
Let's go ahead and turn this off.
If you need an assistive screen reader, press the window.
There we go. So that can go back. That's done. It was completely reset back to factory spec, so it can go back in the box and be returned. So still waiting for somebody to offer up an issue here. Yes, Vincent, we've already tried that. SFC scan now is not. That's a command you run when you're having issues with Windows files. That's not going to help us here. Somebody wants me to try bootsect. So I've never seen that command. I've never done that. Let's see what it does. Does it even acknowledge that as a command? It does. That's a good start. Let's try it. /nt60 sys/mbr. Target volume will be updated with boot manager compatible boot code. The system partition was not found. The requested system device cannot be found. Next. Plug the drive into a different PC and use Partition Assistant. Well, the Iomi Partition Assistant will not convert. You need to buy the Iomi Professional version to convert MBR or to convert GPT to MBR. But the mini partition tool, which is free, does allow you to do that. And that was already done, and it's still not working. Let's try that. So a lot of people keep saying to type in this boot rec/rebuild, which we've done now. I'm going to do this for a third time. I like how people just come in and they just start offering advice without even listening to where we've been so far. And this is, again, this is a hobbyist thing. This is not what professional techs do. It's like a doctor. Imagine if you went to see a doctor and the doctor didn't know what you've already tried and immediately starts assigning prescriptions to you. Prescriptions that perhaps you had an allergic reaction to or that cost a lot of money and had no effect. And if that doctor doesn't take the time to understand your symptoms and what you've already tried, then you just wasted your time and money visiting that doctor. So in the same way, you're a doctor for a computer when you're a technician, and it's important that you listen. You have to listen to what the problem is and what's already been tried, because if all you're going to do is just repeat what everybody else Googled, that shows your level of incompetence. That shows that you're a hobbyist. It shows that you have no real professional work history. And the reason I want to define this isn't to humiliate or embarrass anybody, but it is to empower the viewers as to how dangerous the internet is with false information or incorrect information coming generally from people with good intentions, but who cause more harm than good and create a lot of confusion and waste a lot of time. And that's why people pay people like me to fix things for them, because they don't have all day to sit around and play around with it, especially when they're running a business. You might be running an eBay business from home, and you're trying to save money to prevent paying a guy like me to fix your problem. But while you're trying to fix it, you're not making any sales, or you can't check your sales. Like your eBay store is still open, but now you're not getting notification of what's been sold. And if you go too long with that, people are going to say, you ship too slow. You're going to say, hey, my system was down. They don't care. All I know is I ordered a product from you. You didn't ship it on time. You waited a week to ship it because you were too cheap to pay somebody to fix the problem. And you sat there and messed around and messed around and messed around. And in the meantime, you couldn't list anything new on eBay. You couldn't leave any feedback. You couldn't address anybody reaching out to you. Your system is down. Your business is down. So how much money did it cost you to not pay somebody, right? Now, the advantage of it is that when you do fix it, if you stay with it, you will have gained that education, but at what cost? And so for some people, if you're just sitting at home and you don't care, that's fine. But we really need to differentiate that difference, because it is so widely abused here on the internet, and there just are not enough professionals speaking out. And professionals don't have to. What's in it for them? Like, you're going to call them when you need them. When you've run out of options and you've made the problem far worse, it's just going to cost you more. So it's not in the professional's best interest to try to encourage you to do it right, because it's just costing them work. And I suspect that's probably why there are not a lot of guys like me doing what I do on YouTube. Why would you give away the store? But you also have to understand that there are certain situations where offering your help could really be hurting somebody. And you should be responsible and know that you can condition your answers and say, look, I don't know how to solve that problem, but these are some Google results I found that you can try on your own, but if it makes it worse, it's entirely possible it'll make it worse, and I don't want you to be mad at me for that. But that's not usually what people do. People just go, boom, type this, do that. And then when everything gets screwed up and tangled worse than it was, they go, oh well, or they don't respond at all. That's the most common thing that I see from hobbyists and enthusiasts. When they get over their head, they just disappear. They just stop communicating. And that's horrible, horrible to be somebody that was counting on that person for free on the internet and to find that person's no longer responding to you. And now your situation is worse. And now whatever it was going to cost to fix just got more expensive and more time consuming for a professional to untangle that plus fix the problem you had to begin with. Now, again, if you're just a hobbyist or enthusiast, you got nothing but time and you've got backups, it's all well and good. But the world doesn't get by with hobbyists and enthusiasts. The world gets by on business. Customers, the computer you're using, the internet you're using, the clothes you're wearing, you didn't make all that yourself. You bought that from companies. And where did you get the money to buy that? That's what makes the world go round. So the message that I'm trying to convey here is to be very cautious over repair advice or how-to advice on the internet unless you are very familiar with the source. So like you can Google my name. You can see I've been in the business a long time. There's like 8 million search results that come up going all the way back to when the internet first became public in the early 90s. You'll find messages from me in news groups. You'll find that I've written a book. You'll find I've hosted a national radio talk show for 6 years. You'll find I've taught at the college. You'll find all this background information. But when you get advice from FlyGuy23 on Reddit, you don't know who that is. You don't know if what they're saying carries any weight or validity. And they hold no accountability or responsibility if their actions cause you more pain. That's your fault for accepting it. So I just want you to be prepared because there's no policing the internet. People are free to say format C:, that'll solve all your problems. And if you do it, you'll wipe all your data. And that being said, this is not uncommon from free support. When you contact, let's say you contacted HP. HP's answer to this would be to restore it back to factory settings. But if you follow that advice, you'll lose all of your data and all of your programs. It does fix the problem, but it creates now a new problem. And HP says, we're not accountable for that. All we did, you called us to how to fix your computer. That's what we did. And they charge you for that. There's a minimum, I think, $35 fee to get somebody on the phone to tell you how to nuke and pave your computer, which isn't what most people want. Most people want to preserve their programs and preserve their data. And so that ends up putting a lot of accountability and responsibility on the technician they hire to do it. But if they're just getting it for free, it requires a certain amount of acceptance that you're willing to take the consequences of free, which is not only your time. And again, the benefit ideally will be a lesson. You will get a lesson through this process. But my question that you have to ask yourself is, can I afford this lesson? And if you can, by all means, I encourage you to learn. But if you're running a business and customers are getting upset and you're losing money, you don't have time for that. You should know how to run your business. That's where your focus needs to be, not on how to fix your computer. Let somebody whose business is fixing computers fix their computer, your computer, and that you focus on your business, which is what you're the expert in. Because in the end, you'll be up faster and you'll make more money and it'll cost you less money. But it's ultimately a decision for you to make. But I fear, just from the customers that I talk to on a daily basis, by the time I get the call, a lot of times the repair is far more complicated than if they would have called me to begin with. I could have had them up and running in 5 minutes in most cases. But because they tried not to call me, they tried to fix it themselves, they turned a 5-minute fix into a 5-hour or a 5-day fix. Now in this case, this is my fault. I screwed up here. And like I said, there's a couple of different ways we can fix this. But I at this point, I want to show you how deep this goes. So if you guys want to continue to make suggestions, I'm happy to type it in. Like I said, I've got a backup. And I have yet to see anybody offer a solution that I have tried that has made any impact whatsoever. Lord of Seven has contributed $2. Thank you. No offense to Fly Guy 23. So I've tried this bootsect command. It does not work. Will it boot in safe mode? It will not boot at all. It says there's no bootable device. I mean, don't you think if it would have booted in safe mode, we'd be in safe mode? You're going to have to work a little bit harder than that. Richard Bogan says, being a Google parrot does not make you a technician. Can we please leave the repairs to Carey? Well, you don't need to leave them to me. Listen, I don't know everything about computers. I have a combination of experience and, on occasion, Google. But what you have to understand is, when I was learning this stuff, there was no such thing as Google. That was not an option on the table. So the things I learned, they really stayed with me because I spent a lot of time trial and error getting this stuff hammered out. And when I was younger, I certainly didn't have as many customers. There weren't as many people with computers. I didn't have the knowledge. I also didn't have the experience, and I didn't have a house and a wife and all the things that come along with expenses as you get older. There were no cell phones, so you certainly didn't have that bill. And internet service was mostly dial-up back then, and you'd use something like Alta Vista, but even then, the knowledge was very, very limited, as not many people were on the internet in the 90s. It wasn't until about the 2000s that it really started to gain some widespread traction, and then with the advent of broadband, it continued to grow and it grows every day exponentially to where it is today. And that makes it even worse, because now it's just a big dumpster, and there's some trash in that dumpster, and there's some treasure in that dumpster. There's not much treasure in it, but it's in there, and you got to do through a lot of digging. But yeah, I still use Google. But the difference is that I'm coming at it from a level of experience, of past history of 27 years of doing this, and trying to remember, because that's usually what it is. It's like, what was that thing I used to do 6 years ago? What was that command? I can't remember what it is. Or what's the name of that tool? Maybe I can find that tool again. A lot of that plays a role. It's, you can be book smart and you can have all the knowledge in a book, but with no actual experience, you're pretty useless. I would much rather have a guy with experience than a guy with the education. And ideally, you'll have a nice balance of both. But typically, you can't have one without the other. You have to start somewhere, and you just begin. That's how it works. You don't just say, well, I can't get the education without experience, can't get the experience without education, so now I just sit here in a checkmate. No, that's just a bad attitude. What you have to do is march forward. You pick which way you're going to go. You're either going to start fixing stuff and figuring it out as you go, or you're going to start reading the books, or you're going to do both. And day after day after day, as your experience continues to grow, you'll become more confident and you'll become more efficient in being able to resolve problems quicker. You're still going to run into problems that will throw you, but that's what keeps the job from becoming boring. Let's face it, if it was so easy for you to just fix every problem, you wouldn't be interested in wanting to do it anymore. It wouldn't pose any challenge to you, any more than playing a video game that it's one level of a guy running across the screen and you win. Why would you want to play that? There's no fun in that. There's no challenge. Anybody could do that. So let me look back at the comments here. Weekend Warrior wants me to type fix boot // Let's try that. Fix boot // Fix boot is not recognized as an internal or external command. What else you guys got? Oh, you want me to load disk part first, okay? Disk part. And we'll list the disk. We have disk 0 and disk 1. We'll select disk 0 and we type fix boot. Fix boot is not a command you can enter. So what else you guys got? Disable secure boot. Secure boot was not invented when this laptop was created. It does not exist. Has a boot rec / fix boot been done? About 3 times. Make a Linux USB and you can format. Well, I can format the disk. That doesn't take rocket science. I'm trying to fix it, not format it. Freak Devil says, just give us the solution. No, absolutely not. No, you're missing the point of the exercise, which is the frustration and the constant misinformation being fed out onto the internet. It is nonstop. So what you can anticipate if you're trying to fix your own problem for free is you're going to be investing a lot of time in it. You're going to be doing a lot of trial and error. You're going to get a lot of bad advice. And then when you do get it fixed, that does not make you a technician. That means you were able to eventually solve that one problem. But again, if a customer is paying you by the hour and a customer needs that machine back to get to work, they don't have time for you to play and figure it out, you know, to try and experiment, trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. You know, they would rather take it to somebody else who actually knows how to fix the problem. Serious people who have a business are losing money every minute it takes you to fix that computer. So there's a reasonable amount of time it should take. It should take between an hour to 2 hours to fix most machines. If it's going to take longer than that, then you have to talk with the customer about doing a reinstall, because a reinstall, then it stops becoming about what you can fix and gets to be about what's the guaranteed fastest fix. So if the guaranteed fastest fix to estimate to reinstall Windows, grab the updates, reinstall the applications, reset up the email, back up the data, restore the data, you can kind of estimate how many hours that's going to take. And the sooner you get started on it, the sooner you'll be done. On the other hand, you shouldn't jump to that right away, because that's not really fixing anything. Anybody can do that. So to prove your worth as a tech, you should be able to resolve most computer problems by actually repairing them and doing it in less time than it would take for a reinstall without all that inconvenience to the customer. Get that customer back up and running. And that's what makes you worth 125 plus an hour, because there's very few people in the world who call themselves technicians who actually have the skill to do that. So we're sitting here with 1,169 people watching, and of all the suggestions I've tried, nothing has worked. So out of 1,168 people that some of whom consider themselves pretty tech savvy, and I can't read everything in the chat. It's possible the solution has gone by and I haven't seen it. But of the ones I've seen and I've tried, from 1,168 people watching, nobody's got the answer. And this is very common. It's very common that people undermine the skill required to be a working tech because they can fix their own computer at home. But when you deal with hundreds of computers with different operating systems and different configurations with different hardware, it's a world difference beside comparing to what you have at home, which is one machine with one set of hardware that you're just accustomed to using. And that's also the same in corporate IT. A lot of times in corporate IT, every computer is identical, has the same software, and it must be set up according to the policies and the procedures which are documented so that it's easier to support. We can't have one person in the office doing something completely different with different software, different hardware, without separately trained IT just for them. It's not practical. So the idea is that you make everybody the same. And what happens with those IT guys, a lot of times somebody will say, hey, can you fix my computer at home? And most of the time these IT guys say, no, I can't. I don't know how. I know how to fix what we do here in the corporate office because I have documentation and policies and procedures to follow. Outside of the corporate office, that doesn't apply. And a lot of times they're so burned out from working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that the last thing they want to do after work is to help some employee with their home computer, even if they know how. which leads them back to guys like me. I used to get a lot of work from IT departments that would say, can I give your card out to our employees because they're asking us to fix their home computers and we don't want to do it. And I said, yeah, absolutely. How many cards would you like? Hand them out. And it's good business. It's really good business. So now I'm just looking for how we're going to fix this boot drive. So we have a restored hard drive with the operating system partition, data, and programs installed that Acronis had converted to GPT. I've converted it back to MBR, and now it simply says it's not a bootable device. Warren thinks I should boot a Macrium 7 rescue disk and then select fix MBR. Maybe. I'm looking through the chat. HVAC A to Z has contributed $10. He says, have a few Cokes. Hey, thank you for that. I see Jeff Norris is timing a lot of people out. Jeff, I am removing your moderator status. You are far too aggressive today. I need my moderators to not be trolls. I entrust you, when I turn you blue, I entrust you to act as a good citizen and to be understanding. People sometimes have to repeat themselves in the chat in order for me to see their messages. And if you're removing messages, you are preventing me from seeing them and you're causing harm to my channel. So when your moderator status gets removed, it just means you have to earn it back. It doesn't mean you'll be removed forever. But I can't have moderators doing that. So I apologize for people that were victims of Jeff Norris's abusive behavior with his moderator status. And I don't want to see people in blue doing that. Now, if somebody's being vulgar, time them out. If somebody's clearly being a troll, time them out. And if you're not sure if it's riding the line of vulgarity or trolling, don't do a thing, because I don't want you to lose your moderator status. So yes, there are third-party utilities. Like I said, a tech is only as good as their tools. High Alert Code Red said I was timed out for no reason. I agree. I agree. It won't happen again. Austin wants me to type in BCD boot. I don't think that worked. BCD boot. Yeah. I think we're still in disk part. Let's get out of disk part. BCD boot. Let's C:\Windows. Let's try it. BCD boot. Windows/Y/F. Doesn't seem to be a command here. No, those are not valid commands. I'm sorry, there is no /Y. Oh, Y:\F. Maybe I got it wrong. Nope, does not work. This is not a valid command. Fergus Duffy has contributed €10. He says, hey, Carey, love how you keep it real. Only sorry I didn't find you sooner. Thanks for inviting us in. Well, thank you, Fergus. Thanks for supporting the channel. I appreciate that. Lonzo says you just have to reallocate the recovery partition. Yeah, that's clear. So what exactly is the command I would type to do that? Ben DeCourge has contributed $9.99. He says, hello, Carey and chat. Hope everyone is doing well. Hey, Ben, good to see you. Ian, we've already done all those commands that did not work. And Ronald just basically typed the exact same thing. He's got something different in here. Hold on, let's see. Ronald wants me to do boot rec fix MBR. Okay, then he says boot sect. You never have to type .exe. You guys should know that the .exe, you don't have to type. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. Boot sect /nt60 all /force. Okay, that worked. And he wants me to run the attrib command. I guess we're going to unhide. Let's see, attrib. These are file attributes. -H is hidden, -S is system. We're removing those attributes from, I think he's got the wrong drive in there. We'll just say boot /BCD, file not found. Pretty sure the C drive is not going to work on that. Yeah, that's not going to work. Yeah, there's no boot directory. I'm not quite sure where you're getting boot from. I've never seen a Windows install that has a directory called boot. I wonder where BCD might be. No idea. And then boot REC, we'll just skip that step. Rebuild BCD, we've already done this. Scanning all the disks for Windows installations. And then when we say yes to this, that's where it errors out. It says the requested system device cannot be found. Select the partition, already did all that. Setting the active partition's already been done. Charles has an idea to do boot rec. Let's see, boot rec d:/Windows. But then he wants to know the system drive, which I don't know what drive letter the system drive is. Presumably it would be E. We'll scan OS and see that it finds Windows correctly here. It does find it in d:/Windows. But as to the system drive, I wonder if it could be C. Let's try again. Nope. That's not a valid command. Bootrec followed by the drive letter is not a valid command, because the command that follows bootrec has got to be the /mbr, the fix boot, or scan OS, or rebuild BCD. Yeah, it's not going to work. Next. Is the Windows partition active? Yes. What is the error code at the post? No bootable device found. Could you use a Cronus rescue? As I mentioned, there are probably utilities we could use, but I want to know how I can fix this within Windows. BCD boot, hold on, maybe that's what he meant to type. BCD boot. Failure when attempting to copy boot files. There is no C:/boot. There's no such directory. In fact, I can't recall ever seeing that directory on any Windows installation ever. So it sounds like somebody's Googling stuff and they don't really understand what they're suggesting. And this, again, very common on the internet. Bootrec scan OS already did that. It finds Windows on the D drive. So we got 1,215 people and still nobody has the answer. So people are suggesting third-party utilities, whether we're using a disk partition utility, Linux boot disk, some kind of bootable CD or USB, Hirons. People are naming all kinds of weird utilities, which may or may not resolve the problem, none of which I've heard of before, which then requires a whole nother level of knowledge, getting yourself familiar with where you find the commands to do those things. And we just run around in circles. Somebody's saying use active at boot disk. So I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's a free utility or if that costs money. Remember, anything that costs money, somebody's got to pay for it. And if it's a tool I would use a lot, then it'd be worth paying for. But if it's a tool I only use this one time for this one customer, it really wouldn't make sense to purchase it. It says it's a free download. $356 megs. We'll download it. We'll give it a shot. Okay, Lourdes is removing people, removing moderator status from Lourdes. You simply cannot be hiding people for posting their suggestions. It's not acceptable. Carl is concluding there's no way to fix it at a command prompt. Somebody's saying they found a boot directory inside of the Windows directory. I didn't find one in there either. If I go to d:\Windows and then change to the directory boot. Oh, it is there. Well, that explains why I never saw it before. Okay, so that is the boot directory there in the Windows subdirectory. It's not off the C drive. Is the boot order correct in the BIOS? Yes. Cashboxer has contributed $9.99. He says, you learned me a lot of computering. I love the videos. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Could you use the mini tool partition wizard? Not if I can't load Windows, I can't. You'd have to have Windows running to get the mini partition tool installed. Wants me to rename the boot BCD. Okay, let's take a look in there. File not found. Yeah, I don't see a BCD folder or file, nor can I set attributes to anything called BCD. It just doesn't seem to exist. Windows should always be on drive C. Well, Windows cannot be on drive C if you have booted from a rescue disk. The rescue disk is the boot drive is the rescue disk, and the boot drive is always drive C. So if you have two boot drives, whichever one boots first becomes the C drive, and then following drive letters for any additional drives it finds. So when you're working with a drive that isn't booting, it will never be the C drive when you're booting to another disk to work on it. The disk you boot from becomes your C drive. So don't let that confuse you. Again, hobbyist versus professional. Any professional already knows that. It's very familiar. This common misunderstanding with hobbyists really shows the fractured nature by which they attempt to solve problems by just throwing darts at a wall blindly. It is profoundly dangerous. And I encourage all of you who have given wrong answers to be very cautious over advising other people how to fix problems, unless you yourself have personally done it and know exactly without Googling it. Because let's face it, anybody can use Google. You would be better served that instead of providing an answer you Googled, provide the search, copy and paste the URL to the search and empower the user to look through those results themselves. Teach a man to fish. Because even if you got lucky and that problem did resolve it, that's actually causing more harm because it's empowering you and encouraging you to continue that behavior. And because you're not being held accountable financially to the harm you're causing other people online, I don't know how people sleep at night. I really don't know how they can sleep at night saying, well, I tried to help this guy, but it turns out he just lost everything because of me. But it's not my fault because my intention was to help. It is your fault because you should not have offered that advice from Google results. Absolutely not. But again, if it's your computer and it's your data, that's fine. You're the one who suffers the consequence. But when other people, complete strangers online, suffer consequences because they were dumb enough to take advice from a complete stranger on the internet, I'm not sure which person is the one that's really to blame. I suppose the person offering the advice had nothing to lose by doing it, and the person taking the advice had everything to lose by accepting it from somebody who remains a complete stranger with an anonymous name, with no history and no accountability. Kind of both people are at fault and both people deserve what they get. Unfortunately, the person who's offering the advice rarely gets any negative response or consequence. It's the person who's following the bad advice that has to pay all that consequence. And it's too bad. It's too bad because without accountability, let me put it this way. I should be grateful for it because it makes up a majority of my work. People trying to fix things themselves or having a friend or somebody who was, their heart was in the right place. They didn't intend to cause harm, but they did. And they made a bad situation worse. It made the repair cost more and take longer. And then usually when people experience that, they only do it once. And I always tell people, the minute you have a computer problem, call me first. It will be faster and cheaper for me to fix it than if you try and fix it yourself or ask a friend to fix it for free and they end up not fixing it. Now it's going to get expensive and take longer. It's your choice. I just want you to know, as you proceed, decide accordingly. Again, when you're running a business, when you can't pay your bills or book your plane tickets or access your photos, when your whole world comes to a screeching halt over some download or mistake you made clicking on a link in an email or opening an attachment or whatever happened, it can make a bad situation worse. And sometimes it's cheaper and faster to pay somebody to get it done. Other times, like I said, you have the time and it's not that important to you and it's worth it for the lesson, then absolutely, I agree with you. It is worth it because there's no other way you're going to get that education. Nothing replaces experience. I can sit here and I can talk till I'm blue in the face and I can transfer all this knowledge in my head verbally to you, but without you actually doing it, you have no concept of the wisdom that comes from experience. You have the knowledge without the wisdom. I can explain to you what the word hot means, but until you burn yourself, you don't really understand the definition of that word. Same with balance. We can talk about balance. We can talk about it all day. But until you're on a bicycle learning how to ride without training wheels, only then, through that experience, do you fully comprehend the depth of the word balance. And so it's these examples that I give to try to underscore what I'm trying to emphasize to you. And it's not that I'm better than anybody else. It's about recognizing the dangers that lie from free stuff on the internet, whether it's advice or software or links, whatever it is. There's generally a price to be paid and a lesson to be learned, good and bad. And that for you to accept your own consequences and your own accountability before you're willing to take on anybody else's. Because if you're not willing to accept your own accountability, then you have no business taking on somebody else's. That's just common courtesy. And it's also a good practice. It's not going to make you very many friends if the best of intentions has caused people harm. Over a series of time, you're going to feel, you're going to be like, man, I put a lot of work into that. And they're going to be, yeah, you screwed it up really big. And then you're going to end up in a fight. I see that all the time in the forums where somebody's trying to help and then somebody else is trying to help. And then they get into a big argument with each other. And the poor person who asked for the help is never seen in that message thread ever again. And that message thread can go 100 messages long of people arguing with each other over trying to help an individual who never revisited the thread and maybe never even read any of the responses. Welcome to the internet. So one of the things we could try doing, just to move on, most of the tools that we need are already in Windows. So if we just exit out of this, we can try like, okay, here's startup repair. If we do startup repair, excuse me, it's probably not going to be enough to fix this, but we'll let the startup repair take a run at it. And it's great when you can just push a button and Windows fixes itself. And Windows 10 is far better at healing itself than any version of Windows before it. And these people who want to hold on to Windows 7, they, oh, I don't like Windows 10. The world is going to leave you behind. You will be left in the dust. Failing to move and evolve to Windows 10, then you should move to Macintosh, or you should move, an Apple product, or move to a Linux product, or, Google Chrome or something else. But to continue to think you're getting away with something by running Windows 7 after support ends is only going to hurt yourself. I've had a number of requests from people who ask me if I will build them a new machine, but they need to have Windows 7 on it. Windows 7 does not run on a new machine. I've got a video that demonstrates how you can make it and force it to run. But you have to understand that Windows 7 was written 10 years ago. It doesn't know what an NVMe drive is. It doesn't know what USB 3 is. It doesn't know what any of this new technology is. It certainly doesn't know an X87 chipset from a Z87 from a Z390 chipset. It wasn't written for that. The engineers did not have crystal balls. So even if you go through the time and effort to make it work, it still won't allow that machine, that new hardware, to operate optimally. It'll always be crippled by Windows 7. So if you want to continue to use Windows 7, use it on a computer that's 10 years old. You'll be fine. Or on a computer that's at least 6 years old, minimum. So if you want a new computer, buy a new one that's 6 years old and put your Windows 7 on it. You'll be happy. If you want to buy a new computer, put a modern operating system on it for your own sanity and security. This idea of staying with Windows 7 is the most foolish thing I've ever heard, and it just shows the ignorance that exists about the depth of the threats that exist on the internet and how software and hardware work and talk to each other. Going 10 years, a lot has changed in 10 years. In fact, I think Windows 7's been out more than 10 years. And so much has changed that it's very difficult for Windows 7 to keep up because it wasn't engineered for it. It was never written for that. You're basically taking something that was written 10 plus years ago and you're modifying it and attaching add-ons and patches to it to allow it to continue working. But it's not working well. It's not working optimally unless it's on older hardware that it was designed for. But everybody's got their money and their time, and of course, far be it for me to tell you you can't do it. It's not my job to tell you what you can and cannot do, but it is ill-advised. Startup repair cannot repair this computer automatically. Okay. Let's restart. So we'll hit escape. See if we can get to the start menu here. I got to turn it off entirely. So right now, if I pull the if I pull the flash drive out and we go to start it up, you'll see that it won't boot up. It says boot manager is missing. Press Control-Alt-Delete to restart. So we'll go and turn it back off. And we'll do F9. And that'll bring up our boot devices and we'll select the flash drive, which will boot us back to the Windows 7 install. The initial release date for Windows 7 was the 22nd of July 2009. But it was written for 2 years, at least 2 years before it was released. So if you count the release date, then yeah, you're at 10 years. But if you count since it was coded 12 years ago, or was continued to be started and evolved 2 years prior to it. So it's like a movie. The Avengers movie didn't just come out, they spent 2 years making it. All right, so getting back to this, we'll run, let's try install, yeah, we'll try install now. Let's try something here. I don't know if this will work. I just want to try it. I'm curious. I just thought of it. So the cold reality here is, in most cases, for problems like this, people are not going to be able to help you, and you will make a bad problem worse, and you will be left without a solution. And there's a part of me that just wants to leave the video without the solution, so you feel the agony of what that feels like when you decide you're going to do it yourself to save money. I really want to end this video without an end, because the reality is that's the ending for most people until they hire somebody. Oh, it's not going to let me do an upgrade. It's not going to allow that. It says if you want to do an upgrade, you have to start the upgrade from within Windows, but we can't get Windows to boot, which means we probably would have to do a custom install. There's our primary partition, and then our secondary, our system partition. Let's just see what happens. So what would probably happen here is it would rename our current Windows directory to windows.old, and then it'll install a fresh copy of Windows, but it's not going to carry over any of the programs. Now that's going to save the customer's data, and that will get us back up and running. But unfortunately, the customer's not going to have their programs anymore, which means Office and email and all that other things, printers that were configured, that's all going to be lost. It's essentially a clean install without wiping the hard drive clean. And that leaves all the junk, all the temp files, any viruses, any malware, all that remains on the drive. But you've got a clean install of Windows 7, which is not activating any of that, but it's still consuming your hard drive space. And if your hard drive, in this case a solid state drive, is only 250 gigs, space is a premium. So it's not ideal to install a clean version of Windows without formatting the drive. But in some cases, it's necessary if a customer doesn't have the knowledge, skill, or tools to pull the drive and put it into a dock or a USB adapter to pull the data manually off of it because they didn't make backups. And this may be the only way to maintain the data, knowing full well that when you're done, you're going to have a big mess of data files all over your hard drive, and that ideally you will pull your data, then wipe the drive clean and do the install yet again so that it's clean. But again, with Windows 7, you will also have 1.5 gigs of updates to do, requiring about 12 reboots, taking somewhere between 10 to 30 hours just to get the updates from Windows. Plus, on top of that, reinstalling all your drivers and then reconfiguring things the way you like it. So it's a big, big job, very time-consuming job to go through that process, but that's not going to work for us. It's still downloading that active boot disk, which says it's a demo. So I don't know that it's going to be fully functional unless we pay for it, from what I'm seeing. And it's a very slow download. It's only 356 megs, but their website's very, very slow. It's only 182 megs in this whole time. Welcome to my world, ladies and gentlemen. And you can understand my frustration with the hobbyists and enthusiasts and the know-it-alls who oversimplify this job. It's no different, I imagine, than any other skilled profession where people see TV shows and they see articles online and they think they can diagnose themselves and they can dismiss all of the education and experience that a doctor might have, for example. But it goes back to accountability. You know, if a doctor prescribes you something that kills you, that's probably going to put the doctor out of business. If not, it's going to be a very expensive lawsuit. But if you go buy some drugs off the street and it kills you, you know, the drug dealer very rarely gets caught. Sometimes they do, but you're still dead, and it was your own decision, and you paid money for that. So in much the same way, probably the same with a mechanic versus somebody just messing around with their car, all different circumstances. Let's just take a look here. I want to go back to the repair side on this. Let's cancel this. Let's go back to repair. I want to get back to that command prompt. Is this a 1 Coke repair or a 2 Coke repair? Well, so far it's a 1 Coke repair, but I'm about ready to open another one. Back to a command prompt. Let's go back to disk part. And let's list disk, select select disk 0. And let's shut it down. Get a Coke. Time for a Coke. Boot MGR is missing. It's still downloading that file. Let me see. I think I have a Cronus Universal Restore. So restoring the image, you can play with the images all day, and Universal Restore is not a bad idea. So you sort of get back to this point of there's typically numerous ways to fix a single problem with a computer. Sometimes it's not just one way. In fact, one of the things that draws me into this career is that I can use my own approach to solve a problem that somebody else would do something completely differently. But as long as we get to the end result that's desirable, how you get there isn't really that important, except for how much time it takes in a business environment, right? You keep mentioning about time. Time is money. People are down. Customers aren't being helped. Imagine you're at the store and the cashiers can't ring you up because their system is down and you want to go home. Let's say you've just spent all this time shopping for groceries. Your shopping cart is full and you're stuck as a customer because you just spent all that time picking and choosing what you want to buy. And now they're going to make you wait until their system comes back up. And you're the repair guy. And your job is to get over to that store and get them back up and running. And many of those customers are going to abandon those carts and leave the store. And others will wait because they don't want to go through that whole process of picking and selecting what they need again. It's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. And it's far different from being in your bedroom toying around with your computer. So I have to keep re-emphasizing this because I feel like it's just not getting through to some people. And when it affects you, when you're the customer and you're the one that's being put off, and being delayed, suddenly you're going to find yourself pretty upset being in that situation because it's nothing you have any control over. So let me see. I've got an Acronis. Let's see. I'm kind of curious about this. Well, I'm looking on my office computer to see if I have Universal Restore. Oh, that's interesting. So it looks like the Universal Restore is an add-on. It used to be a separate image that you could download, but it looks like it's a separate file or an add-on to Acronis that you have to install. So let me throw that on there. Okay, so that should have added that option to my Acronis install. Okay, so I'm going to create new bootable media with Universal Restore. So that's just going to take a minute. And that's already been created. Now, how come that happened so fast? It happened fast because I don't buy $6 flash drives. When you spend $20 for another flash drive you could buy for $6, in this case, I've got the SanDisk Extreme. These have SSD-like speeds, and so when I'm live on video, I don't want to be the cheapskate and make you guys wait as I'm waiting on slow writes because I'm too cheap to buy a decent USB stick. And the same applies with customers. Once again, you're typically billing by the hour, and as a result, customers don't like it if you're just sitting there staring at the screen explaining to them that you can't proceed until the process completes. So time is money, time is money, time is money. All right, so we should see Universal Restore in here in these options. Yeah, Universal Restore. So that's going to load the Acronis Universal Restore for Acronis 2017. This is the latest version. Now, I still believe I can fix this problem through the command prompt. However, I don't often use Universal Restore. And since Acronis caused this problem, it makes sense to let Acronis fix it. It would be a lot easier to just click go and do it than to type in these long string of commands where one little typo and you have to do the whole thing again. So I am very curious how this will work in reality. I have to grab the image, which is on an external drive I've got back here. This is the great safety net of making an image before you get started when you're working on a customer's machine. Because at the very least, I have all the customer's data retrievable. Even if, for whatever reason, due to time or whatever limitation, I cannot get the system up and running, I can at least get the customer's data back and do a clean install. But that doesn't seem like much of a technician to me. The technician should fix things, not just wrap band-aids around stuff and do basic stuff. Acronis Universal Restore. To enable you to boot up to an operating system recovered on the search and install drivers. Cannot find an operating system on the current machine. We're going to restart again. Try this again. Universal restore. I suspect this is not going to work. But we'll see. Yeah, it's saying it can't find an operating system on the internal drive, which is not good. Oh, that's driver search. I don't want driver search. So let's do this. Instead of booting it this way, let's reboot, and let's just choose the regular Acronis application and restore the drive back, thereby undoing all the messing about we did with the drive. I want to put it back the way it was because we could have caused more harm. And then that's the beauty of having that image as a safety net, because it empowers me to try all kinds of different solutions. And then if things don't work, I can undo all of that and put it back as it was. So here is Acronis True Image. We'll run the 32-bit edition of it. And we'll see what happens. We're going to do recover. I'm going to browse for this backup image over on this external drive. And you'll see it lists all the partitions from the image, and we want to restore the entire disk. And we'll hit next. And it's going to analyze that image and then offer us where to put it. And of course, we'll choose that internal 250 gig solid state drive. So that'll take just a minute as it sort of gathers up the information that it needs for that to continue. Is it finished yet? Still working. And it's a little hard for you guys to see that with the light reflection. Now, in theory, Acronis should automatically adjust the image to boot regardless of the hardware. Again, that's the thing I like so much about Acronis, is its ability to adapt automatically. It takes the decision-making away from the user. And unfortunately, the engineers who designed it didn't consider shop usage, you know, the way a technician might use it. And there are a number of complaints in Acronis forums. All right, sorry about that. That were parts for another build coming up maybe later this week. We'll see if I get all the parts in time. I haven't missed anything. Acronis is still scanning that image. All right. Yeah, it was UPS dropping off a bunch of packages. In fact, one of these things is in an envelope. Usually parts arrive in boxes. I don't normally get parts in an envelope. Oh, it's some RAM. Is that DDR3? It is DDR3. Yay! All right. This is the RAM I need for that system I was working on last week. I want to upgrade them from 8 gigs to 16 gigs of DDR3. It's cheap now. It's like $60. So why not do it? Give that computer a little more life. That's good. So I can get that done after I get this done. And then I have that machine I have to install Windows 10 on. It's going to be a long day for me. But remember, PC repair is dead because there's no work. God. Now, here we go. So it only sees the one drive. There's only one drive to restore to, which is the 250 gig solid state Samsung drive that we put in there a few years ago. It warns us that the drive has data on it, and by restoring the image, we're going to erase that hard drive, which is exactly what we want to do. And now it's recovering that image to the local drive. So while we're waiting for that to complete, it does look like the boot disk demo for Active Disk is downloaded. I'm reluctant to open that up on the streaming computer though. What about the DDR3 someone sent me? So the DDR3 people are giving me are like 2 gigs and 4 gigs. That's the system I've got has only got 2 sockets for RAM, so it's got to be 2 8s. Finding a DDR3 module that's 8 gigs is pretty difficult. I haven't had anybody contribute one. What they're contributing are generally they're 2 gigs, and at the most they're 4. So that client has 2 4 gigs now, and in order to upgrade them to 16, the 2 4s have to come out and be replaced with 2 8s. Having anything less than that isn't worth installing, in my opinion. At that point, you should just replace the computer. So if anybody has any technical questions not related to this, if you have any technical questions, be happy to do my best to provide you an answer. And with 1,180 people watching, I'm sure there are other knowledgeable people, as there are in the chat room, that can also answer your questions as well. What I don't like when people ask questions because they feel a desire to ask a question. Like, I like sincerity in the question. For example, if you've Googled something and you've researched something, or you've had other people provide answers and it's not clear to you, those are the questions I want. But if you don't know what UEFI is, you can Google that. If you don't know, what's this and what's that, you can Google that. But if you find those answers to be inadequate, then explain to me what it is about that you don't understand, and I'll be more than happy to try and help you, to help clarify those answers for you. But what I don't care for are people that just feel like, well, he wanted questions, so I'll just ask anything, because I'm trying to, out of 1,100 plus people watching, trying to find the people that are sincere. And it's a shame that those people don't get their question answered when they had a real sincere question, because they got flooded with a bunch of people just asking silliness. So I'm just asking you, if you have a sincere question, I will do my best to provide you a sincere answer. But I do like to see people, make an attempt to try and resolve the answers to their questions, and then failing that, then ask me, because most of the questions, basic stuff, what's this and what is that, are already well defined on the internet. But when it comes to understanding, that can be where the hang-up is. And if you convey to me where the hang-up in your understanding is, maybe I can use an analogy or something to make that a little clearer for you, so it'll make sense. Is it confirmed that Windows 10 is to be the last OS made by Microsoft? So 4 or 5 years ago, whenever Windows 10 came out, Microsoft made a very bold statement that it would be the last OS. That has not changed. That is news that is 4 or 5, let's call it 4 years old. Microsoft has not changed their stance from 4 years ago. There's no such thing as Windows 11 or Windows 12, nor is there any discussion of it. And as far as Microsoft is concerned, Windows 10 is it. Now, it seems to me that sooner or later they're going to have to change. They're going to have to change the name, even though it could be the same operating system, because it's going to start to feel old, even when it's shiny and new, by keeping, Ford did that with the Ford Taurus, and then they renamed it the Ford 500. And then it sold really poorly, and then they renamed it back to the Taurus again. It's the same car, but the public's perspective of value can be just an illusion of name. So I think it's just a matter of time before Microsoft's going to have to rebrand Windows 10, but we're not there yet. What is the best system restore software other than the built-in restore in Windows 10? I like to use Acronis. That's what I use. My HP crashed. Can I fix it? It's hard to find a repair shop here. It depends. A lot of these HP or pre-built computers are throwaway designs that are not repairable, or they cost more to repair. It depends on what the failure is. Like if it's just a hard drive that failed, of course you can put a new drive in and reinstall your OS if you have a bad RAM module. But if you have something bad on the motherboard, it probably would be cheaper and faster to buy a new computer. And ideally, if you build one yourself, you won't find yourself back in that position. But as they race to the bottom to get to those bottom prices, you end up with a system that, out of warranty, when it breaks, it's designed to be thrown away. But again, without knowing all the details and specifications of it, just to give you an idea, like if you were to mail the system to me for repair, it would cost you around $100 to ship it FedEx ground within the United States, and then equivalently back to ship it back to you. So without parts and without labor, you're in at $200. If it's a $300 computer that's already several years old, that doesn't make any sense. Is it worth it to try and repair it yourself? Maybe. If you want to change out some parts and spend the money and it doesn't work and you chalk it up as educational value, by all means. But if it's something you rely on and you have to have, it may be something you shouldn't be toying with, and that you should pay somebody to fix it for you. But again, make sure you get a quote on that because you don't want that repair to exceed the cost of a new computer. And at this point, almost any cost over $100 is more than the value of the computer. If what you bought was a $300 to $400 computer several years ago, it probably doesn't have any value today. What make and model is that screwdriver set? This was sent to me by Nick Poverman in the chat room. It's Pittsburgh Pro. I think that's a Harbor Freight company. And it's great for laptops. About the only time I would pull out a tool set like this is working on a laptop. But it's a really nice toolkit, and I thank Nick for sending it to me. I've only used it like 3 times, but when you need it, you know? Is it better to have a boot NVMe plus a SATA SSD for games or just a larger NVMe? Just a larger NVMe, absolutely. If you have 2 drives, then you have 2 drives that can fail. Think about it. You also have more additional cable management and cables to run, which, you know, it's more opportunity for cables to fall off, more need for more power, adds more heat, crowds up your case, which affects airflow. So you want to minimize as much as possible. And by minimizing, you reduce the cable management, you reduce the heat, you simplify the build so that when things go wrong, there's fewer things to diagnose. And it just keeps everything less complex, which means it's less likely to break. And when it does break, it's easier to diagnose and fix. But I will say for most people, you know, even if you just went with like a 2 terabyte Intel 660p, which are like $200 now, most people can't tell that apart from an NVMe drive. It's half the speed, but at 1800 megabytes a second, there's very few people that will see any advantage real world to doubling that to 3600. There's very few people, but you're gonna double your price to get double the speed. You're looking at $400 plus for like a 970 Pro 2 terabyte drive. It's very expensive just to get that added speed. Now, when you're coming off a mechanical drive is probably moving data between 100 and 200 megabytes a second. So at 1800 megabytes a second with 2 terabytes, you've got a lot of space. You're at 9 times the speed of a hard drive without the expense of going, let's say, 18 times the speed of a hard drive. And in the real world usage scenario where you're loading games or you're loading Microsoft Word or Microsoft Office or loading web pages, you're talking about milliseconds of difference that your benchmarks will gladly show you, but a human being would be hard pressed. But it does depend on how you use the computer. So when I speak in generalities with regards to the average user, and the average user would never, you know, hit write speed limitations or anything because they just don't do that kind of saving. And if they do, they don't do it very often or for very long. So it wouldn't impact them in a negative way. So if it was me, I would spend the $200 on an Intel 660p 2 terabyte NVMe drive, which again is half the speed of the Samsung 970, but still much, much faster than, say, a standard SATA SSD, which will run about 550 megabytes. Again, at 1800, you're nearly 4 times the speed. And the price is about the same if you were to go with a 2 terabyte SSD, SATA SSD versus a 2 terabyte Intel 660p. You're right around the same price. Might be $15 difference with the Intel being like $15 more. But when you're spending that kind of money, what's $15? But time versus money, time versus money. When you're getting milliseconds back for hundreds of dollars, you'd have to be a pretty extreme user to see any benefit from that, unless it's important to you to brag. But I don't subscribe to that. I'm interested in getting work done. I don't care what people think. Like, people can think whatever they want. It has no impact on my life. So what I care about are if my customers are happy, if work is getting done, and that you know, customers would be referring me and they're satisfied with the work. That's what's important to me. Some stranger on YouTube who wants to be negative or you know, stir a pot. It's like a fly in the room. You know, it's sort of like, it's annoying, but it doesn't prevent me from getting my job done and doing what matters. The fly doesn't matter. It doesn't have any impact. Viable Solution says, Carey, I recently had a technician replace the motherboard in my Alienware laptop, and after he did the job, when the laptop is starting up, it tells me looking for memory and says no memory found. Well, I think you should hold people accountable, and you should call the company up that did the work or call the technician that did the work and have them come back and fix it as many times as necessary until they get it right. And then you should write a Yelp review about your experience. Michael Lee has contributed $11. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for supporting the channel. Bill says hard drives are noisy. Yeah, hard drives are noisy. That's true. And they do fail more than solid state drives. The life of a solid state drive is at least 4 times the life of a hard drive. A mechanical hard drive has an average lifespan of 5 years. Now, there's people that have had mechanical drives for far more than that, but we're talking about the average. So if you have one hard drive in one system and you've had it for 15 years, that is not the sample that most people will experience. Some people will, but the majority will not. And again, as a hobbyist or an enthusiast, and you're dealing with your computer or your friend's computer, that is no measure of dealing with hundreds or thousands of computers every year, year after year after year. So just because you have a different experience, you also have much less of it. But that being said, as long as you have a backup of your data, a failed hard drive is really nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Like if you have an Acronis image, you would just put your new drive in, restore your image, be back up and running in 15 minutes. It's really not a big deal. But for the people who can't be bothered to make backups, their world comes crashing down and you'd think somebody in the family died. And it's a real shame because it was all avoidable with simple preventive steps. And people just don't think it's going to happen to them until it happens to them. And then they'll cry on your shoulder and ask for your sympathy. Carey, I've got a very old laptop with Windows Vista installed. Is there an alternative Windows I can use? No. You would want to go to Linux if you want to continue to use that. A computer is not a toaster. It is not an appliance. It is not meant to last years and years and years. And they have to require updates for security, both in your BIOS. Lots of different ways people get infected, not necessarily just because you clicked on something, but because you have a piece of software that allowed people in. Java and Flash do that a lot, Adobe PDF. Things like that have to constantly be updated. Windows itself has to be updated, or an exploit can get through just because you're turned on and connected to the internet. Some people seem to think that if they turn their computer off at night that they're safer because the computer's off. It doesn't work like that. Viruses attack your computer thousands of times a minute, constantly hitting your router. Always, it's all automated by fast computers, and you cannot put a stop to it. Turning your computer off means that it's not being attacked anymore, but the minute you turn it on, if there's an exploit, it will be infected before the desktop loads. And that's what happened with the Blasterworm. If you want to do a little research on the Blasterworm back in Windows XP days, people were getting infected before the desktop loaded. Now, in this case, having a router is all you needed to protect you from these kind of exploits, but there are other exploits. There's Spectre and Meltdown and all this other stuff that just goes on and it never ends. And so if you want to protect yourself online, you've got to use modern hardware. And so to use something that's really old and outdated, you might as well just leave your wallet out on the front porch. Let whoever wants it take it. But you can learn Linux, and it will run on older hardware. And because Linux is not in use by the majority, quite the opposite, it's not really the target of virus makers. It has viruses, don't get me wrong. Every operating system has viruses. But because a virus writer who writes a virus wants to have the greatest impact possible because it's a money-making thing. Right? If you run a business and you can sell a product to men over the age of 90, or you can sell a product to teenagers, which one is a bigger audience for you to sell your product to? Are there more teenagers than there are men over the age of 90? I would say yes, there's a lot more teenagers. So therefore, you have a lot more potential customers. Because Linux is so rarely used compared to the Apple platform and certainly the Windows platform, virus writers go to where the people are. That's your greatest impact. That's going to bring you the most amount of money. And as a result of that, if everybody switched to Linux, then Windows would be the safer platform. If these were reversed, it's not that Linux is safer, it's that it's just not worth their time because the end result of all their hard work, at the most, if every Linux user bought it and fell for it, would be a fraction of 1% of the Windows platform users out there. And so the virus writers want to have the greatest impact and make the most amount of money, so you want to impact the people The majority of people, the majority of people run Windows. I don't fix Windows because I like it. I don't fix or not fix Apple because I don't like it. I'm trying to sustain a business. There's more work because there's more Windows users. If there were more Apple users, there'd be more Apple work. If there were more Linux users, there'd be more Linux work. And as such, that's where my business would steer towards. It's just about sustaining a business. It's not about saying one is better than the other. Whatever the majority uses will always be the source of the attacks. It doesn't make the one that's less used better, but it's called security through obscurity. It means that if you're in a crowd of people, then your face doesn't stand out, right? You're just in a crowd. Nobody knows who you are. Versus if you're standing on top of a mountain all by yourself, you know what I'm saying? Then you sort of stand out to anybody who can see you. You draw their eye. But in a crowd, why would you draw somebody's eye in a crowd? That's called security through obscurity. A lot of Linux users, what I don't like about the Linux community is they like to think they're superior. They like to proselytize their operating system and imply that they're smarter than you because they use it, because it's safer. And that means it's better. That is so false on so many levels. Now, you use whatever you want. It doesn't bother me if you want to use Linux. But it does bother me if you come and you proselytize it, because what happens is, if you were successful and everybody converted over to Linux, then Linux would be the target for all the virus writers. Linux has had lots of viruses written for it and continues to, but nothing compared to the Windows platform. Whatever is the biggest platform will be the one that gets the most viruses and the most threats. It's just simple social engineering. It's you follow in the crowd, that's all. But it's not a definition of quality. Am I calling Linux users old people? That's funny. Of course not. In fact, I would say older people are the ones who would benefit the most from using Linux and are probably the smallest percentage of Linux users, because it requires a more granular configuration and operation. It's not as plug and play as Windows is. And they've come a long way. Linux has come a long way. But it is primarily in use by people who consider themselves to be tech savvy and are technically minded. The older generation that does use Linux, in many cases, it was set up by them, by a younger person who just said, click here and do this. And it does work well for those people, but those people are absolutely helpless when it comes to installing a printer or changing anything on the Linux system, because it's harder to find help for it versus the Windows platform. And it's also harder to find support for that printer or that application. You know, you want to install TurboTax on Linux, good luck with that. So there's just things like that the common user needs to be able to get done, which complicates things. And of course, there's emulators and stuff you can load, and it just gets more and more complex to the average computer user. And that's who my channel is really designed for. There's plenty of technical channels for technical people. There's no shortage of that. But technical people who can still speak English to the common man, the common person who have a computer, that seems few and far between on the internet. It seems very difficult to find it. And that's my niche. That's what I do. But what I don't like about the discussion is people take offense to it. People say, well, if you don't love Linux, then you hate it. No, it doesn't work that way. The people who know and run Linux, I don't have a problem with it. I don't say you shouldn't do it. If that was what the majority of people used, then I can assure you that's what I'd be working on. It's about sustaining a business. There's not very many businesses that support Linux and have been in business more than 10 years. They do exist, but when you compare to how many businesses have been servicing Windows hardware for more than 10 years, it's not even a comparable number. So when we're talking about business, when we're talking about being able to make money, and ironically enough, a lot of businesses do use Linux, especially for like web servers and things like that. It can save them a lot of money, add security. But also when you hear about all these websites getting infected, that's all on mostly on Linux that's happening on. But the Linux people, a lot of times what you hear is how great it is, and they don't really have a well-balanced and honest answer with regards to the downside. It's everything's beautiful and perfect all the time. And that's simply looking through the world through rose-colored glasses. It's not true. There are downsides to everything. Nothing is perfect. And it needs to be updated just like any other operating system. And if it's not, you'll get infected. It's just less likely because it's not as popular. But it doesn't mean I'm against Linux. It's just not what I do. And if I could run a business paying, having people pay me for their free operating system, I would love to see how that business model works, because it doesn't make any sense. But it certainly has its place, and certainly in a lot of hardware people have in their homes, their TVs probably run a version of Linux, a Roku box or a media streamer, or even a NAS device or a router may be running a flavor of Linux that is that user interface that's seamless to the end user. And without it, things would be a lot different when it comes to configuring your router or all of those devices I mentioned, and then some. How's our laptop coming along? It says it's got 17 more minutes, so we're still progressing slowly. And of course, there's jobs you can get in the Linux world. They're just harder to find because there's not as many of them. It's a numbers game. Steve Larkin says, I've upgraded my wife's HP laptop to a solid state drive, and because it's so hard to open up, we put in another 4 gigs of RAM. And thank you, Carey, for giving me the confidence to do this. And yes, she is happy with the results. Right on. Ben says, Linux OS is secure by design. So this is that blind mentality. Linux is not secure by design. It absolutely is not. If you want to go to Google and type in Linux viruses, there'll be all kinds of viruses that show up that were documented, and how the lack of the design in Linux allowed for these viruses to go in, even to the point where the kernel itself that Linus Torvalds created needs a redesign. It's in desperate need of a redesign. And Linus Torvalds, he got so frustrated with the Linux community himself that he sort of blew up, and then he had to apologize and say, I'm stepping away for this for a little while. So even his own community has turned on him and caused him to snap. So this holier than thou, this I'm better than you, I can do no wrong, it's simply not honest. It's really refreshing to me when I meet a Linux user who's honest about it, when they say, well, this is the good about it, but this is also the bad. And it's very rare that you run into a Linux user that's open and honest about the bad side of Linux. It has a very bad side to it. There are some consequences of running Linux that they're willing to accept, but that doesn't mean other people are willing to accept it. And that is what prevents most people from ever trying it. And their inability to accept that or acknowledge it is what causes this rift, this I'm better than you attitude that comes off from a lot of Linux users that communicate online that want to boast to you that I'm running it, that it's better than Windows. Like, who asked you? Who cares? Do I go online and go, I'm running Windows 10 because it's better than everything? No, absolutely not. I don't care. You can run whatever you want. I honestly don't care. I'm running a business, and I can't run a business fixing Linux computers. That's all it's about. That's all it's about for me. Doesn't make Linux bad or undesirable. Absolutely not. And for those who enjoy it, I'm not telling you you shouldn't. JR has contributed $2. Thank you, Jay. But anytime, so what the Linux community fails to realize, and I have to keep underscoring this, is if it was flip-flopped, if everybody running Windows was running Linux and everybody running Linux was running Windows, then the people running Windows would talk about how much more secure Windows is, because it's not a big target of virus writers, because there's not enough of an audience there to make it worth their while compared to the other operating systems that the majority are using. Whatever the majority uses is what will be impacted with viruses, Trojans, malware, exploits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are exploits on Android and exploits on iOS. There are exploits in every operating system ever written, and there will continue to be until we move beyond that to some other platform. It is in its design, in order to make it customizable, to make it do what you want it to do, somebody else can customize it to make it do what they want it to do. And therein lies the circular logic of the operating system as we see it today. We've got a ways to go with evolving the OS so that it doesn't play the role that it plays in the way that it plays it. It needs a complete breakdown and reinvention, keeping all that in mind. And maybe I'll see it in my lifetime. I don't know. I thought by now Microsoft would have some competition. I also thought by now YouTube would have some competition. It's not happening. These companies are not reinvesting, and they're not trying to take out the current bigwig. And as a result, Microsoft kind of sits as king of the hill on that. YouTube sits on the king of the hill for the video platform, and it's just waiting for a competitor to come along. And a company like Google that has all this money could easily come up with an operating system to compete with Microsoft's Windows. And I'm staggered and just absolutely beside myself that the best they've got is Chrome. Really? They've got to do better. And Google has the potential to unseat Microsoft. But there's a number of other large corporations in the tech sector that also have the money and the skill to come up against Microsoft and actually offer the public a choice. Just not yet. But it's going to happen. Microsoft won't stay on top forever. The great thing about being around in the industry for as long as I've been is you sort of see the change and you see it go around in circles. Where it was once Wang computers had 30,000 employees, now they don't exist. Where IBM was what you thought of when you thought of computers, they're a shadow of their former selves. Where Microsoft was this tiny little company with a horrible name. It's micro and it's soft. Great name, Bill. Now they're leading the way. Apple, to see Apple come from nothing to huge success and then go back to nothing again, only to bring Steve Jobs back and then make it huge again, only to see Steve Jobs pass away, and now it's starting to fade out again. I suspect Apple won't be around much longer. I think it's going to head down the path it was on after Steve Jobs was forced out the first time. I think without Steve Jobs, Apple's time is very limited. Competition's good. I don't want to see Apple go away. But they've been stagnant now for too long. They're not bringing any innovation. And I don't see that leadership that Steve Jobs had. And I think without Steve Jobs, you've got no Apple. They can reside with they're the most profitable company, I think, there's only 3 companies, I think, that are trillion-dollar companies. I think it's Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. I think those are the 3 companies that are trillion-dollar companies. So Apple can survive for a while off their money that they've already made, but they need some innovation like they used to have with Steve Jobs in order to maintain what makes Apple an Apple. We'll see what happens. And Microsoft needs innovation too, don't get me wrong. Microsoft's got it easy because everybody's so accustomed to it and they're sort of tied to it. You don't really have much choice. And that's where a competitor should come in and offer people the choice. That's what I'm saying. It's not about saying one's better than the other, just one's far more popular than the other 2. Far more. I mean, it's not even close. The number of Windows users compared to Apple or Linux users, it's not even a number that's near each other. That's just reality. It's not a choice. It's not a preference. It's not an attitude. It's not a bias. It's fact. If you want to give me a shout out, tell me where you're watching me from. I'll always love to see where people are watching around the world. I've got 1,103 people watching right now. And we're still Still recovering here. I think this is all through USB 2.0, so it takes a little bit. It's not a very big image, but USB 2 is so slow. Harry's watching us from Shropshire in the UK. Steve Bernstein joins us from Florida. Joseph Neal in the UK. We've got viewers in Texas, Australia, South Africa, Iowa, Michigan, Massachusetts, Ireland, New York, Scotland, Wisconsin, Vermont, Arkansas, Finland, Chandler, Arizona, Toronto, Canada, Silicon Valley, South Florida, more in England, Slovenia, Toronto, Louisiana, New Zealand, the Netherlands, Canada, more in Canada, Kentucky, Denmark, Germany, south coast of the UK, Melbourne, Australia, the Philippines, Grand Junction, Colorado, Ohio, Ghana, Wigan in England, Las Vegas, Nevada, New Jersey, St. Augustine, Florida, India, Macedonia, Chicago, Houston, Williamsport, Pennsylvania, Norfolk in the UK, Serbia, Placerville, California, Kenya, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Pakistan, Sydney, Australia, Montreal, Canada, Menifee, California, Spokane, Washington, West Virginia, Denmark, Rutherfordton, North Carolina, Romania, Hungary, Missouri, more in Pennsylvania, Texas, and Australia, Utah, Tucson, Alabama, Pakistan, Nova Scotia, Georgia, Oldbury, England, more in Denmark, Newfoundland, Canada, Wales in the UK, Indiana, Illinois, Palm Springs, California, Mexico, more in Florida, New Jersey, Columbia, Macon, Georgia, Buffalo, New York, Oklahoma, Springfield, Missouri, Laverne, California, Denmark, South Africa, North Carolina, Greece, Long Island, New York, Oakville, Canada. Carey, have you ever been to Arkansas? Yes, I have. Casa Grande, Arizona, Aberdeen, Scotland, Austria, Texas, West Midlands in the UK, Northwest Kansas, Charlotte, North Carolina, Turkey. Welcome in, everybody. It's always cool to see where everybody's watching from. I do like to encourage people who enjoy tech to consider it as a career, but I want you to be prepared of what the career is going to expect of you. I don't want you to go in there thinking it's all liquid coolers and RGB lighting. In fact, it's far from it. But I think it's a very rewarding career, and it's very interesting, to have to solve these puzzles and be the hero. When you go in there and you solve that problem and you do it quickly, you get all this praise and gratitude. Sometimes you get nothing but attitude and not gratitude, but that's all right. It comes with the job. But I will say that the gratitude, even if you get this much gratitude to this much attitude, this wins every time. And so what you did, and you can sleep well at night, and you can have a job that you don't grumble at, getting up to go to work in the morning, that you can actually enjoy it. I've had people say, Carey, what do you do for fun? And my attitude is, what do you mean, what do I do for fun? You should ask me what I do for work. I love this stuff, even when I'm getting frustrated trying to figure something out. Or I get frustrated dealing with people who, I'm trying to communicate with and they just won't listen. At the end of the day, I know the service that I'm offering to my customers. I know the value I bring. And I know my customers see that and appreciate that, or I wouldn't be in business for 27 years. And I keep emphasizing that to people because it's very rare to find anybody in this industry that long unless they're employed by a big corporation. And even then, people staying with companies for more than 5 or 8 years is pretty rare these days because people go from company to company to company for whatever reason. It could be layoffs. It could be they just left on their own. They weren't happy. Whatever the situation is, finding that kind of stability in the world today is pretty uncommon. And I'm very proud of it. It's not really a boast as so much as it's me saying, no matter what people say on the internet, no matter what people do, there's no way that you can sustain a business for 27 years not doing it right, not being honest, not ripping people off. You cannot sustain a business that way. Any business in any career. You will be gone. You will be there and you will be gone, as many of my predecessors have come and gone, and I still stay and I still stand through attrition. That's my philosophy. And so if there's people online that are saying negative things about me, it makes no difference to my business. It doesn't impact the reality that I have customers, many, many customers over nearly 3 decades that see the value in what I do. And if you don't see the value in what I do, I don't care unless you're a customer. Because I don't make any money from what people care. I don't wake up in the morning and go, gee, I wonder what Fly Guy 23 thinks of me today. So if somebody goes online and they want to make up a story about, I don't know, that I'm scamming people, it doesn't make any sense. You don't scam people for 27 years, not in the same business. You'd have to keep changing the scam. So I think if you use your own head and you just sort of do the math, you'll understand fact from fiction. And the reality is what you choose to believe doesn't put me out of business, and it doesn't get me any customers or cost me any customers. You have to understand that whether you think I'm a good guy or a bad guy, it has no impact on me. And it is the best advice I've ever heard is it's none of your business what somebody else thinks of you. And there's always going to be somebody, no matter what you do or who you are, there will always be people to demonize you. That's the world we live in. And the good news is we all die. So all these people that are just looking for a pot to stir, they're looking to demonize. They're trying to be social justice warriors by demonizing innocent people because they were misled. Those people all die. So all of this is all very temporary. Just do the best you can. Try to, if anybody gets in your way, you stay on your path. And if they get in your way, you just sort of run over them. Not literally, but move past them as though they weren't there. Don't let them slow you down. If you know in your heart and in your head that you're doing the right thing and you've got the support of friends and family or customers, in my case, that's all you need. You don't need strangers on the internet to give you any sense of accomplishment or fulfillment. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a lifetime of disappointment. Wild001 has contributed 10 Australian dollars. He says, keep up the great work, Carey. Hi from South Australia. Thank you there, Wild One. I appreciate that very much. We're still restoring here. Poor Fly Guy 23, huh? That's twice I've talked about him today. He's a fictional character. He doesn't exist. Or at least he probably does exist, but we don't know each other. So he doesn't know, or she doesn't know. Although for she to pick Fly Guy would be weird, but it is the internet, so. I do have one final thought on that. And that is, if you find yourself in a situation where people are talking about you, you should be grateful for it. And the reason for that is that means people know you exist, and that means you're worth talking about. Even if they're saying negative things, you're still the subject of conversation. How many of you can say you've been the subject of conversation from a group of people online, even if it's to attack your innocence? There is a consequence of becoming popular. And as I become more popular, and I'm far from being popular, don't get me wrong, but I'm more popular now with more subscribers and more viewers than I've ever been before. And with that, there's a negative side to it, right? And that's people want to find a reason to hate. They want to find a reason to demonize. But when you really think about it, they're talking about me. And they weren't talking about me before, good or bad. They didn't know I existed. So sort of the consequence of making yourself, making other people aware that you exist is some of those people are going to be dead set to demonize you, to make you out to be a horrible, horrible person, and you will not change their mind. And doing so is sort of like picking a scab. It just encourages them. And, you know, and in case of picking a scab, it causes the healing to take longer. If you ignore it and you move forward, those people will drop off one by one as they find somebody else to demonize. It's usually very short-lived. It'll go on for a couple of weeks, and then it'll just kind of peter out. And then they'll find something. These people, they need to be outraged by something. And if you were the outrage of the week, yeah, just let it pass. It's really not a big deal. But if you try to fight it and if you try to get in there, you're just going to make it last a month or 2 months. You just ignore it. And eventually, you know, they'll realize they're not having any impact. They'll realize that they're spending their time talking about you and nobody's talking about them. Sooner or later, they come to this realization that this isn't working. They're not getting anywhere and they're wasting their time. Some people take a little longer to figure that out. So you have to be patient and just sort of ignore them and just keep marching forward. And you won't even realize when they're not there anymore because you've already ignored them. So the end result for you is the same. So they can continue that. But the more people mention your name, the more people go, well, who is this person they're talking about? And then they look you up, and then suddenly you've got more viewers just to see what all the talk is about. Madonna did that in the 1980s. You know, she had a record that people said was it's too hot for radio. You know, you can't put that on the radio. What is it? I want to hear it. It has the exact opposite effect. So, you know, the more that this happens, the more my subscriber numbers go up, the more my view numbers go up. So as irritating as it can be, it's in my best interest to allow it and to actually encourage it. Because if you're running a business, having people know you exist, good or bad, is absolute key to your sustainability. Ideally, far more people like you than hate you. If it's the other way around, you probably won't be able to sustain a business. But to think nobody's going to dislike you is not realistic. Even though these are complete strangers, they've never met you, you don't know who they are, that won't stop them from attacking you. That's the basis of the internet world that we live in now. So accept it. Just accept it, or don't enter into that world. Don't put yourself out as a public punching bag if you're not willing to take on the downside of it, because there'll be nothing you can do to avoid it. So this has got a few more minutes to go. Fly Guy 23 is going to have more viewers now. Exactly what I'm saying. And when you run a business, you have to understand how that applies in business. Not all customers will see your value, but not all customers are good customers, right? And I think that's a big mistake people have. There's an old adage that the customer is always right. Well, that might have been a good adage in 1950s, but it is, and maybe even the 1970s, but it doesn't apply today. There's too many entitled people who don't appreciate the value of what somebody offers. I have a friend who's an artist, and they'll offer their goods at conventions, sci-fi convention, comic book conventions, kind of steampunk related stuff. Very time consuming, very creative, very imaginative stuff. And they mentioned to me that sometimes someone will come into their booth that they're paying money for, you know, to rent this booth and to haul all their wares out to wherever the convention is and set it all up. It's a big expense, a lot of time, not to mention all the work that went into making the stuff to be available for sale. And somebody will start taking pictures of stuff. And they're like, well, hold on, what are you doing? Say, well, I like that, but I can make that myself. Well, of course you can make it yourself. What do you think, I'm Harry Potter? You think I waved a wand and I did something nobody else can do? If you want to take a picture, you can ask me. But I can promise you, you can't make that the way I made it. You're never going to make that exactly the way I made it. I have experience. I've been doing this for many, many years. I have tens of thousands of dollars worth of professional equipment that helped me to make this. You sitting at home with a needle and thread, yeah, you could make that, absolutely, but it's not the same thing. And it's very insulting to an artist to go, well, I could paint that. It's very insulting. Nobody said you couldn't, but you're paying for that creator or that artist for doing it for you, for sharing their vision. You know, even a musician, you can play any song. John Lennon sang it in Imagine. He said, there's nothing you can do that can't be done. Well, it's absolutely true. And as a result, people pay because they appreciate the time and the effort and value what that artist created. If you don't value it, if you think the world is a big rip-off place where you can do everything yourself and all you're going to do is steal ideas from other people, well, then you might as well just start a company and call it Microsoft. maybe that wasn't the best example. Now that I hear it out loud. So when I have a customer that sees the value in what I do, that's a good customer. That's a customer I care about. If I have a customer who's just trying to get something for nothing and they think that they can do what I do and it's real easy and all I have to do is use Google, then go use Google. Leave me alone. I don't have time for that. And I'm not going to spend time trying to convince the customer of my value. I have learned the hard way that is a complete waste of time. Let the customer go do what they're going to do. And I also don't shut the customer out. I won't say, well, you can try, but you'll fail. I don't do that. Well, you're never going to find anybody faster or cheaper. No, don't say that. Just say, if you can do it better than me, go do it. If you can find someone better than me, go find them. If you can find somebody faster and cheaper, go find them. Please. We'll all be happier. In the meantime, I have other people that see the value in what I do, and I want to make sure they get my time and attention, not wasting my time with somebody who I have to twist their arm to see it. It's just no way to run a sustainable business. It's not efficient. You know, you could spend hours and hours and hours trying to win over one person. And if you win them over, what's your gain? You know, unless it's a big corporate contract that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's not worth it. Almost done. Almost done. Yeah, the John Lennon song is called Imagine. Nothing you can do that can't be done, nothing you can sing that can't be sung, nowhere you can be that isn't where you're meant to be. It's easy. The simplicity of that song makes it a little stupid. But the depth of what it's saying is also undeniably true. But it's overly simplified, far too simplified. Oh, that's, I'm sorry, it's All You Need Is Love, isn't it? All You Need Is Love, not Imagine. It's All You Need Is Love. That's the name of the song. My bad. Carey, how much do you charge per hour for labor? It depends on the job, the location, and what the job entails. So businesses get charged a different rate. Customers, where I have to be on site, depending on, what kind of work it is, the rate will vary. What also varies is the cost of what that repair is going to cost to get done. So for example, if you live somewhere like Mike Smith lives in Philadelphia, and in Philadelphia, you got to pay for parking, you got to pay toll roads. So for Mike to go on site to a customer's location, he's got to take into account how much it's going to cost him to get there. Forget the gas mileage and the wear and tear on the car, but we're also talking about, again, toll roads, parking fees, and then cost of living. What does a house cost in Philadelphia versus what does a house cost in Phoenix versus what does an apartment in New York City cost? And all these factor into what your rate should be, combined with how much experience do you have. There's no one rate. You can't say, for example, I'm worth what Carey's worth. I mean, you could say it, but ideally, you know what your value is. If you don't know what your value is, it has nothing to do with what my value is has nothing to do with your value. There's a number of factors involved in that. So that being said, I don't really talk about what I charge customers because it's not the same for everybody. Working on a server would cost more per hour. Working on something that is absolute business critical, an emergency call, something that's got to get done right this second, drop what you're doing, rates go up. Evenings, weekends, rates go up. The distance to how far I've got to go, rates go up. And at the same time, rates can go down if it's something simple. It's a home user. Maybe it's a new client. I want to impress them and want them to come back and say good things. Or maybe it's a regular client that calls me regularly and I'll make a deal for them just as a reward for loyalty. So there's not any one single rate. It all depends on the customer. More demanding customers that are further away pay more. That's generally the way it works. All right, so we have recover operation succeeded. And I'll click OK. And we'll close that out. I actually don't need to close it. I just need to turn it off. So we'll hold the power button in until the machine turns off. And unplug the flash drive, unplug the USB drive. And I suspect we'll be right back to where we were, but at least it undoes all those changes I tried. Now, the only thing it can boot to is the internal drive. Hey, starting Windows, we never got that far before. Hallelujah. That did work. I still believe there was a way to do that through the command prompt to fix it. However, you always want to do the easiest way. That's, again, if customers are paying by the hour, or even if customers are paying a flat rate, the more customers you can help in the day, the more money you made that day. So if you're going to be stubborn and insist, I'm going to fix this with the command prompt, oh yeah, I'd say I'd say that restored properly. Is there any free space? You still got some room for icons over here. That's a lot to lose, right? And the customer needs that back. So they can use it while they're getting the other laptop returned and find another laptop solution. And then we'll be right back at square one again with regards to moving their data and configuring a new laptop. So everything I just did for the last 2 days with these two laptops has been a complete waste of time. I lost some serious money on this, and I'm not going to charge the customer a penny. I want the customer to come back with the laptop, with the right laptop, and I'll do the job. And then I'll charge them that time. But it won't be twice the amount. That's my fault. It's entirely my fault, and I have to pay for that. This is accountability. These are consequences. I have to learn from that. I have to know that I cannot sustain a business doing that. I cannot take this long with every customer. I cannot make those kind of mistakes because I'm in a hurry. It just cost me 2 days. If I would have slowed down, I would have been done faster. Think about it. But it's not often somebody brings me a computer that old or asks me to do that job. So I wasn't at the top of my game. Yeah, not my best work. But the important thing is I saw it through. I put everything back the way it was. So there's it's exactly the way the customer gave it to me. I haven't made any other changes. And it was working fine for the customer, just not fast enough. So I've made no modifications, no updates, nothing. It is exactly in the condition it was given to me in. And then we'll do this again. And the first thing I'll look for when the customer brings me that laptop is to make sure it's got a solid state drive in it. And if it doesn't, we'll make sure that we can upgrade it before I do anything. That'll be the first thing I do. That's the good lesson with the School of Hard Knocks, is the lessons are expensive, but they stay with you for a very long time. You can get all the great grades in school and not carry it with you outside of school. You just forget it. So real experience trumps Google or anything you see on YouTube or online. Living life is a lot better than watching other people live their lives on TV. I'm telling you, it's true. All right, so if anybody has any final questions, I think we're about ready to wrap this up today. What did I say I had to do? I got to install the DDR3 RAM. I guess we can do that now. Let's button this thing back up. Let's shut this down. I don't even know what these are anymore. I know one was an Acronis disk. I'm done with this. I'm going to put it away. I will save my customer's image for about 30 days. And that's if anything bad should happen, because customers don't have backups. I've got it. And after 30 days, I erase it because it becomes a liability. If somebody breaks in my house and steals this laptop, then they potentially have my customer's data. And if they use that against my customer, guess who's at fault? Guess who's liable? Again, hobbyist and enthusiast versus professional. It's a whole different set of rules. And it's not all fun and games, but it can make a lot of money. It can make you very happy and satisfied and fulfilled with the work that you do, knowing that you're helping people, you give people a good value, you do good work. And that's basically proven by how many years you can be in business, because nothing you can say can change that. You can't say, well, yeah, I had this one business, but then it filed for bankruptcy because it wasn't my fault. Yeah, it's always your fault. If you're the business owner, you have to accept accountability for things like that. So there are people that will play that off. And there are many people who are very successful today who had previous businesses that failed and filed bankruptcy until they got it right. And there's no harm in that. There's no shame in it. Just don't say it's not your fault. Of course it's your fault. You're the business owner. Your success or failure is your own responsibility, and you're the only one to pat yourself on the back, and you're the only one to blame when things don't go right. So I'm just securing the SSD back in the computer. And, you know, this HP was pretty easy to work on. You'll see that the solid state drive, pretty easy to get to, RAM, Wi-Fi card. And then we just have a couple of panels that go on. We'll put this one on here. And then there's one screw that goes down. And these have to go in this order or you won't be able to access the screw. So that screw's only visible when the other panel's removed. And this panel has a screw that's only visible when the battery is removed. See how that covered up the screw I just put in? And it just sort of snaps into place. So for an HP, this one isn't too bad. Not too bad at all. In fact, that Dell is worse. That just goes to show you there's not one single company that's just absolutely horrible. They're just, in general, I like Dell laptops being much more serviceable than HPs, and they tend to be more reliable. But that's my anecdotal experience speaking. So that's good to go. And you saw how fast that was to button that up. And I don't want to confuse these power adapters. These power adapters are not interchangeable. And if you plug the wrong power adapter into the wrong device, you could smoke the device and completely ruin it. So this one's done. This one has been reset, so it's done. And we'll set it over here. And we'll keep its power adapter with it. This is my little USB to SATA cable that I use for connecting laptop hard drives and solid state drives to a USB. They're like $8 on Amazon. They're pretty cheap. And if you have an old SSD, you just buy that cable and now you've got a little external flash drive you can use. So it's a great use for a smaller, slower SSD that you may have upgraded. Now let me go and get that other computer that needs the RAM upgrade. Let's see here. This should be relatively simple. Get it off of there, put it over here. That's just an identifier. So I know whose computer belongs to who. When you get a lot of them, it can get confusing pretty darn quick. Done with these screwdrivers for a while. And let's get the screwdriver out. Still on the original charge. I still have 2 lights on the battery meter, so battery's lasting a good long time in here. So this computer, I cleaned it up since the last time you guys saw it. I've cable managed it to put some missing screws. There were some wrong screws, so my OCD is happy. And that's what it looks like there on the inside now. Not a whole lot of room for cable management. The idea is to get the cables tied up and out of the way. Got a 1 terabyte ADATA SSD in there. And then these are the 2 the DDR3 RAM modules back in here. And we'll just simply remove those, which is a little difficult to do with all this cabling in the way. There's one 4 gig module that'll go in a stack of extras. Remember, I said I had no shortage of this stuff. unless it's 8 gigs, in which case I don't have any other than what just arrived today. So this is G.Skill Aegis DDR3 1600 speed RAM. Like I say, it was around $70, maybe a little less than that. And hopefully it's compatible with this Asus system. I can't see why it wouldn't be, but you never know. Hope for the best and expect the worst. That's my motto. We got our Go Faster sticker. Gotta have that. Is this a clean install of Windows 10? I think it was. Well, that's it. Memory upgrade's done. Let's just test it and see if it works. Should be 16 gigs now. So let's give it some power. Flip the switch to off. That's not the original power supply. The customer had changed that power supply out and put a 2 terabyte Seagate drive in there. I pulled the 2 terabyte mechanical drive, replaced it with the solid state drive, because as I mentioned earlier, about 40% of your system performance is lost because you have a mechanical drive as your boot drive. So if you just simply change your bootable drive to a solid state drive, you will increase performance on average about 40%. Your computer will be 40% faster. Talk to anybody who's done it if you don't believe me. And they're cheap enough now that it's not a big risk for you to try it. But I haven't talked to anybody who's got a solid state drive that said they want to go back to a mechanical drive. People will still use mechanical drives because they can have larger capacities. So if you have a lot of data you need to store, if you're one of those people, yeah, you're going to need a mechanical drive for massive storage, or a NAS. But the NAS is going to have mechanical drives in it probably. Keyboard and mouse, that's what I need, keyboard and mouse. Let's turn that on, turn this on, plug in the dongle. And let's plug this other end of this HDMI card into the video capture card back here. And then let's flip you guys over to that input. Here we go. All right, so it says no signal because there's no signal coming out of this yet. We'll hit the power button. Probably have to flip the switch, right? There we go. Fan is starting to turn. Want to make sure no cables are in the way. Everything's tied up nice and neat. It's a good start. If it didn't recognize the RAM or the RAM wasn't compatible, we wouldn't have posted. And it should be relatively fast now. We should have given this computer a whole new life, easily another 3 to 4 years, I would say, of usable life on this computer. As you can see, it belongs to Gene, and we're already at the desktop. That's pretty impressive for a computer that's this old. It just gave it a whole new life. It's like a brand new machine again. And everything's responsive. Let's right click, go to properties. Let's make sure we can see 16 gigs of RAM in here. And we do see 16 gigs. The other thing we can do is we can take memtest 86, since this computer has to be shipped, to make sure that the RAM is fully functional. The only way to know is to test it. You know, if we're only using 6 gigs out of 16, we won't have any RAM errors until the system gets pressed hard enough. So memtest will actually go through that process for us. And what I can do is go to this gear icon, go to update and security, go to recovery, and then advanced startup. We hit restart now, and then I'm going to tell it when it reboots, I want it to reboot to that flash drive I just plugged in. And I'll do that right here in Windows 10. Use a device right here. We want to use a removable drive, and hopefully it'll boot to that. We'll find out in a minute. I think F10 or F12 may be another option we can use. Yeah, that's not working. Usually it would offer me the it would say what the flash drive is, and I didn't see it in there. So I'm just going to hit delete, see if I can get into the BIOS, go over to boot, and then we're going to go down here to tell it I want to boot to that one right there, UEFI disk 2. And that should start memtest 86 if I'm not mistaken, if this is UEFI compatible, which it should be. Flash drive is blinking, so something's happening. And just be patient. There we go. And you don't have to touch anything. I've got a quick tips video on how to make your own memtest 86 flash drive and how to create it, how to use it. And once you boot to it, you don't have to touch anything. All the tests will run by default without pressing any keys or anything. And I want to make sure that all 16 gigs are readable, that there's no issue with the RAM. And this is the only way for me to know. It would suck for me to ship this back to the customer and have the customer say, it's blue screening on me, and come to find out one of the RAM modules is bad. But I didn't know because I didn't test it to its full capacity. It's happened before. So the important thing is it doesn't happen again. So we'll go ahead and we'll let that run. It'll probably take about an hour. I'm going to wrap things up. I have Windows 10 to install on another desktop computer, which is just a basic install. There's nothing special about it. I'm going to slap an SSD in there, bring up the Windows 10 flash drive, bootable media, do the install, get the updates, run the optimizer. The optimizer's been updated again. We're now at version 1.3 of Uncle Carey's Windows 10 optimizer. And it'll detect if you're on a laptop and automatically deselect hibernate and sleep mode so that they're not being disabled, because you do want those on a battery operated computer. And it has a few more bells, whistles, and features. It will turn off drive indexing as you would expect it to now. Nick has been able to figure that out with the help of one of our users in France. I believe his name is Fab. And Fab had contacted Nick because he understood Nick was having a hard time figuring out how to code that to get that box to uncheck under indexing. So if you have Uncle Carey's Windows 10 optimizer, be sure you go to the options and click check for updates and get, excuse me, get the latest version, which is 1.3. It works better now than ever before. And we continue to refine it. Those updates are free for everybody through January of 2021. And I did not expect Nick to come out with as many updates as he has, but I'm grateful because he's just polishing and polishing and polishing and honing and polishing, and it's just better than I ever imagined it could be. And I can't wait to see what he's going to do next. So does anybody have any final comments, questions that I can answer for you? Wild One says, thanks for the great stream. Hey, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it. I'll give a shout out to everybody who's contributed. I might have missed a few in here. Wild One, JR, The Great Dane, Michael Lee, Joey contributed $5, said he's from Dallas, Texas. Big fan, keep up the great work. Thank you, Joey. Cash Boxer, Irving T. I guess I missed Irving's contribution of €2. Irving posted a picture of himself wearing the Carey Holzman shirt that he ordered, and he lives in France. It's really cool to see the worldwide appeal of the channel. Thank you, Irving, and thanks for being a loyal and dedicated viewer. Ben DeCour and Fergus Duffy, HVAC A to Z, Lourdes Evans, Jason Fortin, and Joseph Panariello. I guess I missed you too, guys. I apologize for that. Donald Strickland contributed $9.99. He says, hello from Fripp Island, South Carolina. Andrew Matthias contributed $2. Jason Fortin again contributed $5. Abdul Azim Patel contributed $10. Home Down Touchdown has contributed $2. William Lynn, Darka, Mark Cook, and the Great Dane. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. I appreciate that very much. And yeah, this test, it's on test 6. It's going to go through 13 different tests. And so far, it's looking good. If all of that passes, then that means I can button this up, take it over to FedEx, and get it shipped back to Colorado tonight. And I'm sure that'll be a sight for sore eyes for the owner of the computer. And it may not even recognize how fast it is now. It'll be like they just ordered a new computer. It's amazing what a little RAM and an SSD can do for an old machine. I'm telling you, this machine is faster than some new machines you can buy at the big box stores for the $300 price range. And it didn't cost anywhere near that to upgrade it. And a contribution from Steve Caruso for $10. Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Steve. Arch says, greetings from Japan. Welcome in, Arch. Don't get many viewers from Japan in here. Always pleasant to see. Yeah, the good thing about being here by myself is I can cough and not have to cover my cough. There's nobody here to get it. I'm sure it looks pleasant and sounds great. Imagine how I feel. All right. Well, listen, I appreciate everybody tuning in and watching. I hope that I have proved my point that I keep trying to... I've decided, you know, I have to take a different approach. I feel like I just keep repeating myself and I'm not getting through. And I feel like by giving people an opportunity to sort of dig their own grave, let's just do that. And maybe I'll end up being surprised and somebody's going to have the right answer, but nothing that I tried from the peanut gallery worked. And so this is the issue with regards to anybody can have a YouTube channel, anybody can type anything on the internet. You really have to consider who your source is. And when people use anonymity, when people hide their identity as an excuse to protect their privacy, that also is an excuse to not be held accountable for what they do. So there's, you know, you have two sides. You have people that say, I'm not going to tell you who I am, and just because I won't tell you who I am doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. What it means is it doesn't matter what you're talking about because I can't hold you accountable to it. Therefore, what you say doesn't matter. When you stand up and say, my name is whatever your name is, and this is how you can reach me, and this is what I advise, and if I'm wrong, here's how you can reach me and I will help you, then that's advice you should consider taking. All too often I'll go to like Fry's Electronics or something, and there'll be some customer in the store going, oh, you shouldn't buy that, you should buy this thing instead. And the customer goes, oh, really? And then they buy it from a complete stranger. Then they get it home and it doesn't work. And I get the phone call. And I go, well, did you buy what I said to buy? They go, no, this other guy told me it was better to buy this other one. I go, well, then call that guy. Well, I don't know who that guy was. Well, then why did you listen to him? Why didn't you listen to me if I'm the guy you're going to call to fix it? Because if you would have just got what I told you to get, you wouldn't be calling me. It's very frustrating. So the next time somebody wants to offer you advice and you're thinking about taking it, ask them for their contact information. And if they're not willing to give it to you, I strongly advise you not to take their advice. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you all again very, very soon. And until then, bye for now.